actually did a CAS report, an actual one for an actual case. When's the last time?
This would be, so I kept all the cases that I had done previously that had been adjudicated.
Okay.
I have not taken new cases since becoming a supervisor.
And just curious, from the last time we spoke, which was about a year ago to now, has anything changed with the technology that we should be aware of? Right. So you had testified earlier talking about timing exams, and you said with T-Mobile they call that true data, correct?
Time in advance is the principle where the network is able to calculate the distance from a tower. T-Mobile has a brand called TrueCall that they use to do that.
And who within T-Mobile would do the TrueCall? The engineers? Who would know that information?
I don't know.
So I'm going to put up your report. And looking at this band.
Hold on a second. You want that?
Oh, I do. Sorry.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, so this is your report, and we have this band here that kind of looks like, I know last time you called a hot dog, I like to call it like macaroni, but what does this band represent?
That is the timing advance band.
All right, so they back at
the engineering report, the TrueCall report from T-Mobile would say the distance from the tower is 0.24 miles, and so then based on the timing advance measurement, which in 4G is 78 meters, that band is 78 meters deep, so it would be plus or minus 39 from 2.4 miles on either side.
So plus or minus, so it's an estimated distance, correct?
Yes.
All right. How does T-Mobile determine? I think you testified earlier that T-Mobile determines the distance by speed times time equals distance, correct?
Yes.
All right. And how fast does that signal travel?
At the speed of light.
All right. And you had testified earlier that the speed of light is a static number, correct?
Yes.
However, I tried to do the math myself because I think I'm really smart. And one of the things that I came across when I was looking at the speed of light was that it could actually be a 3 times 10 to the 8th power meters per second, or
we back
the actual number is 2.99792458 times 10 to the 8th power. So if you know, is T-Mobile using the higher number of the 3 or using the actual number with the speed of light?
I don't know.
Okay. But you would agree,
I don't know.
when we're dealing with the meters per second, that could actually be a big distance, correct?
Yeah, so obviously the bigger the distance or the bigger the time, then the more significant the distance or the difference between those two numbers would be. Yes.
And just curious, would that estimate,
throw like
we talk a lot about
in the chat,
sectors,
let me know y'all can hear,
is it possible that that estimate would change what sector you're paying off of?
Possible estimate change percentage depending on.
Well, let me ask you this,
No.
because if we're dealing with a meter, if we're dealing with a meter, it's 3 feet 3 inches, correct?
Yeah.
And if I'm off by 4 or 5 meters, we're talking about like 15 feet basically, correct? That's a little bit more than 15 feet.
Good. Thank you, bro. Thank you. Who I think winning?
Yeah, so I guess at some point there always has
bro.
to be a transition
I don't know yet,
from
man.
one sector to the other.
No real information out yet,
Because
bro.
they have
It's just
multiple sectors.
a bunch of
So on the sector,
bunch of I don't
could
knows
that
and
change? I guess, yeah, there's a possibility for that for sure.
Okay. Can you do this calculation yourself?
Which calculator?
The calculation of the speed times time
Yeah,
equals
bro.
distance. Can you
Over
do
here
that math
on
yourself?
Twitch, she
Yes.
only has the
By
phone.
hand?
That's she's clutching
And would
onto
you
that
include
phone.
timestamps when you did that calculation?
And that's why I'm trying to figure
So
out,
I
you
did
know,
do that
what
calculation
they got going
for
on.
this report. I used the distance that was in the engineering records that T-Mobile gave it, produced. If they gave
Bear
me
with us.
the
This is
time,
going to be a lot of boring stuff.
we could use either 3.0
You know, this
or
testimony
2.9,
here.
whatever
But
the other number
we'll get to the
was
meat and
supposed to be
potatoes
like.
of this in a
I
second.
do math, if that was your question, but for this report, I did not do that math to produce these distances.
Okay.
What is
So
it?
can you tell me about any publication that would
Guilty.
tell us about
She can't-
these
No,
expected
you right,
accuracy
bro.
of the timing
You're
advance
right,
records?
but see, this is the messed up part about that, right? Because I was with
All
you,
right,
when I first started watching this. I was with you on that.
Yeah,
But you know what I've
so
just
in
found
your
out?
map, throughout your
You
map,
only have
you
to
talk
have-
about these bands
Hold on.
and
Hold on, let me turn this
the
down a little bit because she don't even know what she's talking about. She keeps talking about Wi-Fi bands and
Distance
bands.
from the
Anyways,
tower.
so
Is there any
The messed up part about it, bro, is
publications or
that
any other data that you
all they have to
that
have-
would explain how accurate
all they
that is?
have to have is 8 people out that
Do
12
you know
jurors,
of any
man.
scientific
8.
testing outside
8
of the
out of
legal
12. That's all they
community
need to
as
convict
to
this kid, man.
whole,
8 out of 12,
cell
bro.
tower stuff?
8 out of 12.
Because this is an important part of how cell phones work on a cellular network.
When they said the
Okay.
jury,
Apart from that, no.
you're going to understand this stuff. There isn't a... Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. You're right.
You
If
show
you've
that
been watching,
band
you'll
as
see most of the
a
time these
plus or
people
minus
use...
10
Bro, when they show the jury sometimes,
miles,
and even the
correct?
people in
Is that the
the
width of it?
stands, man, everybody's
78
tired.
meters.
All right.
They're bored.
And could you break that down? How big would
They
that
don't
be?
understand where this lady's going.
If you were to compare, like, would that be a football field, 2 football fields?
No, it's less than a football field, slightly less than a football field.
So slightly less, like 3/4 of a football field.
Something like that.
And do you have any factual basis that would back that up?
Factual basis for what 78 meters is?
Yeah. No, well, the distance, the approximation of the
Fix
span.
this up
Do you have
real
anything that
quick
would
so I
back
can
that
See
up?
what y'all
This is
saying.
why it's 78 meters.
Yeah.
Because that's what based on how the technology works, based on 4G, that's what the timing advance is. I mean, that's just what it is.
So did T-Mobile tell you this in your training, or how did you figure it out?
Yeah, through my training experience, not T-Mobile specifically, but I mean, that's for regardless of whether it's T-Mobile or
You still
Verizon, Sprint,
sleeping, Karen?
4G technology, the timing advance
Oh.
is 78 meters.
No
All
way.
right. So is this an estimate that's being made by T-Mobile?
The distance?
Yeah.
The tower?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
Alright.
it is an estimate. Which means it's not accurate, lady. Like your last evidence.
So would you say that this is T-Mobile's best estimate and it's actually no more accurate than the call detail records themselves?
Well, so I think that in my opinion and experience, generally the timing advance is accurate. The call detail records are accurate. I guess I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So I was just asking, is T-Mobile's best
Homie's
estimate
as confused as
on
I
this
am.
map correct? Is it any different or any more or less accurate than the call data records, the CDR?
I still didn't understand her question.
Well, the call detail records will have to be more accurate because they are less precise. So without a doubt, that is the sector that the phone.
Bro, I told you this was gonna happen. I told you he was gonna
The
come up
timing
here and
advance
it was gonna
measurement.
be up, he was gonna be up there for no reason,
My
bro.
experience is accurate, but there are factors that could
Like,
make
hold on,
it less
quarter,
accurate
hold
than the
on.
call detail
Yeah,
records.
sure,
For
they
instance, we just
couldn't
talked about
use
how the
my
difference
phone
of whatever
at all
3
because
100s in math could.
Yeah, that's another thing that they debunked on her or yesterday. That she tried to lock Melly into into some kind of Instagram account, and the defense blew her up on that. She was like, "Yo, man," defense was like, in time, a bunch of people actually log into these accounts. There's no way that you could tie Melly to this because there's been four or five different people that logged into these accounts. There's a guy that logged into this account even during this trial and took pictures
So do you know
of the
any
trial and
publications
posted them
or
on the
studies that would
account.
back up your opinion?
So yeah, they threw that shit out immediately.
Okay, so
They got her ass up out of there.
based on the information,
There
you
we go. Now I
can't
can actually
really
see you guys.
tell the court precisely which locations these phones are calling in, can you?
One of the limitations of cellular analysis is that you can only say a general area where the device would be at a given time.
All right. So even with the general analysis, all of the stuff that we've gone through for about 4 or 5 hours, at the end of the day, you can never give an exact location.
True.
All right. Can you tell us if a phone is on a highway?
So,
Yeah, they did put. I just read that, Brody. They did put the ex-girlfriend's mom on the stand. Oh my God, that was horrible, bro.
you have multiple data points.
That was literally a shit show,
For
bro.
instance,
That was
like in
horrible.
this case, if you see the device traveling from east to west, the towers along 595, and you have time between those towers, you could infer what the speed would be and say, okay, I think it's likely that they're on the highway because I know the area, or they're on State Road 84 traveling at a certain speed. But from
Oh my
cellular
God.
data alone, no, you can't tell the phone's in a car, on the side of the road, on the road.
Sometimes it's just
Yeah,
live
can you tell us
TV,
who
man. I
it
wish
is?
I could fast forward it. You just saying a bunch of
How
nonsense,
about another
man.
residence located in the area?
No.
And could you tell if somebody was walking around a car with the phone? Would you be able to tell that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Go back to your
No.
report.
This is crazy.
So it'd be your testimony that this phone, 9807, could be from here to here, correct?
Yes.
And what was the distance from here to here?
Well, I don't know what the distance is from one end
I
of
don't know.
that illustrated arm to the other.
Okay. Well, can you actually guarantee
Is he gonna
that
get
the phone
out?
is in that arc?
That's tough. It's tough because like everybody kind of asked me that. It's tough because they
Why can't you
they haven't
guarantee
really
that it's
done
in the
anything
arc?
yet. So like
So that arc estimate or that
if
arc
the
depicts time
if the
advance
prosecution would have
measurement
done
with the-
something like where they would have dropped some information and you'd be like, damn, bro, they gonna bag them off of that.
Yeah. Why I can't
Or
guarantee it's
you
there as
know,
well. One,
vice versa. You know, the
sector
defense
itself,
dropped
the
something
sector
that
itself.
you
So
know
that's
freed them off or
illustrations,
had them somewhere else.
sector,
But
right?
at this point,
Earlier
it's
about it being
kind of up in the
flashlight
air,
to
man.
illustrate the direction that the cell signal.
It's kind of up in the air, and not only
When we
that.
do a flashlight, we draw a cone.
And not only that, this is their third. I think this is the prosecution's
like a tube on a
fourth
paper towel. It's
witness
not actually just a tube, right? Like, it's
that's
right
been
here,
sitting
it's
up there just
either
saying,
or so.
I don't know.
Although this illustration, there's hard black arms that
know.
say this is the limit of the sector. That's not really the case. There's some bleed over.
So far, I don't know.
So that's the first point.
It's
So
crazy.
It could be, in this instance,
For
potentially
people
over
that
here,
don't know what they're
potentially
seeing, they're trying to show that Melly
Second
was
instances, as we talked about,
cell
if there was something
phone
that
at
delayed the signal
3:47
traveling from the tower
a.m.
to the phone or
ping
back,
the tower here, and you'll see that it pinged multiple towers throughout the time he was
distance
traveling.
longer than where the phone actually
And the
is.
reason
So,
for that is, like I said in an explanation earlier, any towers that are clogged up with a bunch of users are gonna bump you off to the nearest tower that doesn't have a shit ton of users and it's a little bit more stable. So that's why you'll see in these stupid maps here
Page 12 of your report.
that he kind of pinged in
I'm looking
all
at
types
it.
of
Can you
areas
tell the
throughout
court if the
the
phone is
county
between
that night.
These two bands at any given time.
No,
From, well,
no, no.
I infer, in my opinion, yes, because it had to have been at some point in time between those two bands, because it was here at 350 or somewhere within this area at 352, 58, and somewhere here at 353, 48. So to get from here to here, we had to be somewhere between them at some point.
But didn't you tell us earlier that you don't always necessarily
I knew she was gonna do.
connect to
See?
the tower closest to you? Is
There you
the one
go.
with the best signal. So could it be possible that this
It's
is
your
actually
boy,
the tower with the best signal?
King
and the
LeBron
phone is
TV.
nowhere
I've been
in
telling
there?
y'all this for like 3 days now.
So this is from the engineering report. And so the engineering report.
Y'all ready for the answer?
Measurements for this tower and sector, the 0.58 miles and the 1.16 miles. The engineering report does not, that's the network's perspective. So what I was talking about with the call detail records, where the phone measures the clearest, strongest
She about to
signal,
shit on him right now. Watch
picks
this.
the tower or the antenna on the tower that offers the clearest, strongest signal. That's from the call detail records. The engineering reports is the network's perspective
So where did you get the engineering reports from?
from T-Mobile.
So didn't you previously testify that Detective Moretti gave you these records?
Yes.
So
But you got him from T-Mobile?
from Moretti?
Come on, bro.
T-Mobile.
From Detective Moretti.
All right.
From T-Mobile.
Wow.
And so the engineering report, is it what Ms. Bradley, the state attorney, had put up previously, all these numbers and environments?
And listen to everybody watching, bro. I want y'all to know I don't have a
Can you
specific.
double check that report?
I don't have a specific tie to Melly, like whether he did it or not. I don't have an opinion. I'm looking for the facts. I'm looking for
You validate it.
for
So
them
you
to
get this
for them to
report,
either
with all these numbers.
prove it to me or disprove
You
it to
have
me.
a system in place at the FBI that you could cross-reference.
But we
to
also
make
talking
sure
about
that
putting a
the
man in
lies
jail
and
for,
lies and the
not even for life. We talking about putting a man in jail and then taking his life because they trying to hit him with the death penalty
Do you even have a
over
total?
witnesses that don't know what they're generally talking about. You're there to explain this.
So, yeah, the accuracy of this report is like pinned on those records being accurate. In my experience, the records that we get from telecommunications providers are accurate, which is why this works.
Well, let me ask you. So, have you ever had an engineer come through on any of your cases, the 130 cases that you had, and have them validate the information that you got from T-Mobile, Sprint, or whatever carrier it is?
So, I've had cases where there was actually, no, not for me. I know of other cast assets who had cases where there was a red flag or a problem, and then we contacted the engineers and said, hey, there's something that's not making sense. We need to look more into this. But for me, no.
All right. Do you know of any instances in these records where a mistake or any oddity occurred?
No.
All right.
Yeah,
So,
bro.
and you already
have,
testified you
yo,
did not
Jordan, they
request
have
an
pretty
engineer
much,
to assist you to review these
from
records,
what I
correct?
know so far, they have nothing. And that's it. And like I said, that's what I'm just
And you
trying
said
to
that one
figure
of these
out. Trying to
bands
figure out what they
would be
got.
a little less than 100 yards wide.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. On Twitch, my boy, yeah, he
I want to show you this engineering report that you're talking about.
that's pretty much what they had to slay him with was that phone. I told you they've been clutching onto that phone. They trying to make the phone relevant right now. All of this data and dinging off towers and cell phone, all this boring shit they're talking about, they're just trying to make what she has in that cell phone relevant and stick to Melly. They want it to be that when she finally provides the information that she's holding on to, the wall she builds around the shaky evidence she has is strong. That's what she's trying to do right now, bro. Because if you had strong evidence, trust me, you wouldn't have to go through all of this. You wouldn't have to go through this to, man, you would be firing off shots. Oh, you didn't do it? Oh, okay, well, why did you have this? Bang! Why were you in this video?
Right?
Bang!
And
Why did you send this message? Bang!
And I'm looking for. Good thing I didn't do the cell tower analysis. It'd be a mess. So
I don't know.
obviously I can't
I guess
handle
we'll have to wait
this
and
modern
see.
technology. But you have a section in here called environment. I just want to
Yes, we'll have to
find
wait.
where it's at.
It's to the left.
Yeah, it's so small I can't even see it. But you know what I'm talking about when I talk about environment, correct?
Yes.
Do you rely on this?
No.
Why?
I don't know how it's calculated.
So, and it goes back to my other questioning. This document that's produced from T-Mobile, from their engineer, your engineering report, says that T-Mobile can tell you if a phone is outside, inside. So, why do you rely on everything else in this document, but you won't rely on that column?
So I rely on the time in advance, I guess, just because I have, well, I think it really comes down to two things. One, because I understand it, right? I understand speed of light times time equals the distance. And two, because I've done that and I've been able to validate that through my real world experience. That's why I have confidence in time in advance. When it comes to the environment and the latitude and longitude coordinates and their associated confidence
bro.
level,
It's the
why don't I use that? Well,
that's the only thing she got, bro.
I didn't use them in this report because I don't know all the factors that go into calculating those.
She works for the state,
And,
bro.
I don't have
You know,
real world
she
experience.
probably got it from
Validating
community.
those or disproving.
She
those
worked for the
myself
state.
personally, whether they would be
So
exact.
you had previously testified that
By the
in
way,
your
this
training,
lady
you
right here
actually get invited out
isn't
to
the prosecutor.
different,
This is
cellular
YNW Melly's
companies, correct?
Yeah.
And were
extra
did you ever
attorney.
do?
She's the
did you
lady
get
that be
invited
sitting
to
next to
T-Mobile?
him, that everybody be talking, that he be flirting with her and shit like
Do
that.
you know if any of your past people went to T-Mobile?
I don't know.
Okay.
So she's
Um,
debunking whatever that lady said this morning with the towers and how accurate they are, and how if they ping you here, they should
Can
be
you
able
tell
to
us
know
how
all the
T-Mobile
shit
can
you
tell if the phone
did.
is indoors?
So she's debunking that right now. She's trying to
Have you
shut
ever
that down.
performed any testing to determine if a phone is indoors or outdoors based on the timing advance records from T-Mobile?
No.
And is there any way for you to verify that environment column? The environment estimate from T-Mobile?
no.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to test it, we could coordinate something with T-Mobile, or I'm sure T-Mobile could test it, where they would use test phones and
Well, he's trying to say if we
Um,
wanted to.
do things that
But
people
it's
do with
accurate.
calls, texts, data. They would look at the phones on their record and say, like, okay, here's our control group, and here's what the data said, and here's where the phones actually were. So, is there a way to do it? I'm sure that.
We were kind of just talking about a hypothetical, because
Right.
as far as you know,
Yeah,
it's never
hypothetical.
happened. Okay.
It's all
So-
hypothetical.
With the true call distance estimates, has T-Mobile ever shared the calculation with you or possibly other members of the cast team?
The calculation is the speed 3.0 or 2.997, whatever times the time. That's the calculation.
So have they shared that with you guys? Have you gone through to find out what exact number is, how they're coming up with these formulas, anything like that?
Yeah, and that's that calculation for time in advance. Again, that's not unique to T-Mobile. That's how all phones have to function on cellular networks. They have to have time in advance measurements of.
Just for the record, so we got a
Oh.
moissanite chain and a
If you,
diamond chain right here.
I will
okay?
shout y'all if I was
Let's take
making
a
money
look.
off of it, but you know what?
Trust in T-Mobile and its records, so you just
They
get
got
them
some
and
real
you go off of
diamonds,
that,
though.
correct?
I plot the data
I
from
said that
T-Mobile
on the fly.
and do an analysis. I don't take anything for given as I'm doing my analysis.
But you don't know if the numbers are correct, because you don't have an engineer validating or rechecking anything, do you?
Hey yo, I got a new follower, yo.
Yeah,
Good
I'm
looking,
taking.
you know what I'm saying? I appreciate you, my
relying on the
boy.
accuracy of the records. Yes.
I appreciate you for following
Basically,
me,
you're
my
telling us that
boy.
we're to trust an
Bozo,
undisclosed
baby.
calculation as being
Objection,
accurate.
argumentative.
Abstain.
Thanks for the follow, my boy.
And do you not have any of the measurements for the underlying true call data?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of columns on this engineering report. It's possible that something is buried there, but I don't think so.
Listen, man, on the flip side, I'm gonna be
Go
honest
back
with
to
you,
your
man. Like,
reports.
let's just say if I was God bless those people that passed away, because like I said, I'm nor here or there in this matter. I just want to see what they have, who's innocent, who's guilty. I'm as interested as everybody else. But like, if I was these people's man, I'd be pissed at how this is going so far. I'd be mad, bro. I'd be mad that we spent like 4 or 5 days just literally talking about cell phone towers and reception and shit like that.
I'll move it up
I'd be
here. So
pissed.
your report says, you can come in the state if you want to help me. Of course. That these two phones, 9807 and 9081, are in the area of the crime scene, correct?
Does it say consistent with, or what's the?
Your language is cellular measurements are consistent with, yes, the two phones being in the area of the crime zone.
Yes.
All right. But is it not true that they could also be over here?
Yes.
And could 9807 be over here and 9081 be over here?
Yes.
Could it be over here?
I said this.
I don't think so. Yes. Yes.
Or right here?
It could be anywhere in that
And again,
area.
this is an estimate because it could just be pinging to the tower with the best signal,
I
correct?
said it, man. I said it
No.
myself.
Because this is from the engineering report.
Okay. So, page 14 of your report, you say that phone number 9807 is within this area, correct?
Yes.
But would you agree it's not actually touching any of the points of interest?
At that time,
Yes.
yes. If you find points of interest, if you mean the locations that were highlighted earlier in the presentation, then yes, it's not overlapping the Montessori Academy or any other place at that time.
Okay, let's turn to page 16 of your report.
Yeah, bro. That's what I was just saying. Yep. I feel you, bro. I feel you. I feel you. I'd be the same way, bro.
So does this
I'd be the
show
same way. I'd be like,
phone
yo,
number
listen,
ending in
man. Not only my tax
9081
dollars going to
near
waste
the
here, but
hospital?
now I gotta get dragged through this
Yes, that's consistent with the
botch of a court case.
But this
Man,
science is not actually
crazy.
precise enough to pinpoint the location of the phone, correct?
Correct.
Once
So
again,
while you
he's,
say it's consistent with it being at the hospital, you actually don't know that, do you?
From the cellular data alone, no.
Right.
yeah, I heard what he said, bro. He put in a report that he stated based off of the information they gave him, he can say that they were in this area. Now he's on the stand saying, well, that's not completely accurate. That's not completely true. They could have been over there. They could have been over here. It's crazy, man.
So this 17. Here. Can you explain what this means? Can you see that?
340, the text box that you're pointing
Yeah,
to?
yes.
Yes, so that means that there were multiple data points on that tower and sector between 3:43 a.m. and 3:52 a.m.
Okay, so 343 to 352
Hey, yo,
a.m.,
they-
that phone number was pinging off of this tower.
So it's from the engineering reports, and that tower saw the phone multiple times between 3:43 and 3:52.
Yeah, because they
Okay,
could have
so let's
pinged
go
through
over
any
here and let's
towers in
see.
that area.
The same thing, all these cell sites that are shown are from the protocol measurement data from Sprint's engineering reports, and those towers in that sector on that tower saw the phone at whatever times indicated.
Do you know the difference from this point to this point?
I'd imagine it's a couple miles.
So from this report, we're showing that there's a couple miles difference, but the phone is pinging over here at 349, but according to your report, between 343 and 352, it's pinging here. And what does this one mean right here?
348.
So it's pinging from this tower at 348.
That tower saw the phone, yes.
All right, and then down here,
350.
Yeah, there's no.
so again, back here, between 343
I'm gonna let her
to
talk.
352, it was pinging off of this tower, but at 350, it was down here.
No way.
No. The phone wasn't down there. It wasn't up here. The phone wasn't in any of those places. That's not what the data says. The data is saying is that these towers at those times saw the phone. This is all from the engineering reports, which means that the towers, these towers that see them, are not necessarily the tower with the clearest, strongest signal. It's not necessarily the serving cell. that
So there
saw
we
it.
go again. My point.
If we had distance information at
So
these
they-
times, we'd see like a band, just like we did on the T-Mobile record. So for instance, at this one, 349, you'd see a distance, whether it was a number like this or like this, whatever. The distance column on that engineering report for all these data points was blank. We don't have distance. So we know that these
You don't have
towers follow them.
distance. You don't have
And we know
pinpointed
that they
location.
were not
You
necessarily
don't have
the service
accuracy.
could have been. Anyone
You
could have
don't
been.
have
We
a
know that.
phone
We don't have
call.
any calls on the call.
You
We
don't
have
have
to
a text
cross-check and
message.
say, okay, well, which tower
You
did the
don't
phone reach?
have
Did we
a
need to call?
witness.
So we're left with
You
the
don't
question
have a
is,
gun.
well, what's this mean?
You
Because
don't
as
have
you-
gunpowder.
you're just asking me, as we were
I'm
talking
so
about,
confused, bro.
349 falls between 343
This is a
and 352.
murder trial.
How could
Like,
two towers and two
a murder
different
trial.
areas both see the phone?
I'm
Well,
dead ass
They both
confused,
did see
guys.
the phone at different times.
I'm
because
sorry.
they registered that connection with the phone. So if you ask me what's my opinion, what's that mean? It's like, well, the phone was someplace where all these towers could see it. And I note that this one is pointed generally west, this one's pointed west-southwest, this one's pointed southeast, this is northeast, this is this way. So my conclusion would be that this data, which it's hard to form a conclusion from because you don't have I don't have the distance information I want. It's not to say, okay, the phone is, generally it's in Miramar. We know that, right? It's not in Fort Lauderdale or Miami. It's probably somewhere in the middle of all these towers. So if I'm asked a specific question, like, hey, is this consistent with the phone being in Silver Lakes? I would say yes. Is it consistent with the phone being in McDonald's?
Yeah,
Yes.
Pa.
I mean,
They do, man. They
this is
do.
a-
And to be honest with you,
So it
the
could be
defense
anywhere
is
in Miramar, basically.
the defense ain't really working
I
either,
think it
Pa.
could be
They
anywhere
just
in Miramar. I think it could be
they just doing the little Floyd Mayweather blocking
Okay.
defense. That's all they doing. They not even really. The defense hasn't even
At
attacked
any given
yet.
time as well, correct? Because
This is
I just
crazy.
for the sake of my knowledge,
Yeah.
when we look at this item that says 343 to 352, so
Yeah.
I know it's hitting that tower throughout that time, right? But it's then also hitting this other tower at the exact same time, and 30 seconds it's hitting this other tower. Is that a fair statement?
The network's hitting the phone. The
Okay.
phone isn't hitting the network, but yes.
Okay, and then how far can a phone go? Is it 1 mile? Could it be between 1 mile and 20 miles? Or could a phone ping off a tower that's 50 miles away? Do you have any background on that?
Yeah, so it depends kind of what you're asking. If you're asking how far away can a phone be from a tower when it makes a call, well, that depends. If you're asking how far away can a tower see a phone, which is a different thing, because the phone choosing a tower is going to rely on the phone's clear, strong signal, and that also depends. Generally, I see.
I can answer this for you,
In the
bro.
range of like a couple miles. but I've
25
seen,
miles.
In extreme cases, many miles that a tower can see.
25 miles for a phone
Okay.
call, and for the phone to
So
be
you would
actually
just-
seen by a
again,
tower, it could
based
be
on
up to
that.
100 miles. My boy,
Any-
come on, y'all
any
professionals,
area,
bro. I'm
yeah,
sitting
anything.
at
Trying to
home,
make a
bro.
precise, a conclusion about a precise location for a phone on this data is.
Now you already know, but thank you for the sub, bro. Thank you for the
So
sub.
wouldn't it
We
be
gonna
more
be here when you
accurate
get back.
just
Trust
to show
me.
a range of where it could be at rather than trying to do these curves and pinpoint the precision?
What do you mean?
I mean, you would agree with me that there are some unknowns. Even though we're talking about the speed of light static, we don't know what T-Mobile's using. Are they rounding up to the 3, or are they actually keeping the right number, correct?
And then it all works out differently. You know, what kind of
Well,
network are they
regardless of
using?
What they're doing, they're giving us a distance, and that's the distance that's plotted. So we plot the distance, applying the records that T-Mobile gave us, not saying,
So
okay,
pretty,
the phone's, you know,
so
here,
pretty
this
much if
phone,
you're just jumping in, if you see
the
these
records
little
show.
tower little thingies here,
Well, it seems like you're
around the
giving testimony
time
that it's
of
precise,
the
but
murder
when
from
you get through the
3:40,
data, how it's
3
used,
a.m.
it's actually
to
really
2,
just
I
an
mean to
estimate. So is it
3:57
precise, or is it an
a.m.
estimate that you're giving us?
Melly's phone pinged off of every single last one of these towers at some point.
It's when I guess it's not an estimate, like,
And it's
hey,
kind of
some
impossible
numbers
for
may
him to be
just
able to
say
travel.
ballpark, hey, out
I
of
mean,
10.
this looks like a little
But
short
you're asking,
distance, but these are miles away from each other.
I think you're asking about really the accuracy, not the precision, because that number, like if it's the number is 0.54 miles, that's a precise number, right? That's down to the hundredths of a mile. You're asking how accurate is that
Yeah,
number?
bro.
Say, okay,
Jordan,
generally,
for sure.
That's accurate.
For
That's
sure.
why with my testimony,
If-
even
if-
when I have a precise number like 0.54
And bro,
miles
trust me,
per
man,
hour,
I've been sitting
I still
patiently
say
waiting,
it's
man,
consistent with
patiently
the
waiting to see them,
location
you know,
generally in the area of this apartment complex. Or
put something out there, man.
The possibility of being on
Y'all lucky y'all ain't had to watch the
So,
last two
based
guys.
on that
The
map,
last two guys were even
could it be
worse.
possible
At least
that
it
we
went
had
faster.
2 phones registered to the same person on the same carrier being operated by 2 different people who were sitting next to each other? Can those 2 phones ping off different towers?
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes.
When you say ping off towers, you mean are you talking about the engineering report?
Yeah, the engineering report.
Could different towers see those phones?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we're both sitting in the car here.
Sorry.
Is it possible that
Yes.
it's pinging off to here and then the other
Yes.
person's phone is pinging here?
Yes.
While they're next to each other.
Yes.
All right.
Great. Glad we got that out the way.
Can you tell if this phone's in somebody's pocket?
No.
Can you tell if it's left on the car seat?
No.
No.
Can you tell if we've had the phone?
No.
Okay. No further questions.
I'm sorry, bro. I'm like exhausted from watching this for so long and seeing the answers. Just no. I get what.
Thank you. You ready to redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You ready? You may proceed.
Now this
So in
is
terms of- I wanna
the
make sure we're
prosecution
clear and
that's been
it's
taking
very
all the
clear for the jury.
L's.
What's the difference between the engineering report and the call detail report?
Yeah, bro.
So the call
I
detail,
thought yesterday was gonna
records
be mistrial, bro.
show
I thought yesterday they were coming in.
the phone's calls.
We asking for a mistrial.
And they will list a
Bing,
tower
bang,
and
bing.
sector in them.
But no, they
That's the
started
tower
with
and sector that the phone identified as the one that
BS.
offers the clearest, strongest signals. That's the tower that the phone chose to connect to when it needed to make a call or send a text.
Nah, seriously, man. I thought they was gonna
That's
come
the
in with
phone's perspective.
I thought they were gonna come in
The
with
engineering report is the network's perspective.
the mistrial
So
information
different
yesterday.
towers that may or may not be the
Nope.
serving cell could have seen the phone.
Why is it important to differentiate between those two?
Because, so if I'm plotting your own report, and I plot the phone that was the serving, or the tower that was the serving cell, then I'm showing, okay, wherever the phone was in this coverage area, it's on this is the best tower, the best, the strongest signal point. With the engineering report, like the slide we were just looking at, none of those may have been the best one. So, if I'm looking at something that I plotted because of on the call detail records, I would infer that that's probably the tower that's the closest or the best.
Oh
line of
my
sight.
God.
With the engineering data. That
Could you imagine being the lady that has
and
to
so in
type
the
all
one we
this
were
stuff
just
out the whole
talking
time in
about,
court?
that was under
Like
the
for like the last week,
371,
you don't even know what you've been typing.
1795.
You're just typing random.
That phone, correct?
yes.
So if you can explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's discussion about the accuracy versus the precision of the records. Is this a precise estimate of which towers saw that phone?
Yes.
And how can you say that?
Because it listed, the records listed specific towers that saw the phone at a specific time.
Are you ever going to say, based on the data that you have here, precisely where that phone was?
No.
What conclusions can you draw from this map based on your training and experience?
That the phone is generally somewhere in the area shown on the map. In my opinion, it's likely to be in the center of the map here because that's
I mean,
where
are we forgetting that Melly was in the car? Of course, the phone is gonna be in the area
So
where it
counsel
happened
asked
at
you
some point.
about the latitude and longitude columns that are on the call records from the engineering
This is
report.
bananas.
Yes.
And so you mentioned that you do not validate these particular records.
Yes.
Could they be accurate?
They certainly could be accurate, yes.
Can you explain as to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you call 911, what does a cell phone provider send out to law enforcement?
At a minimum, it has to provide the tower and sector.
Oh. And at maximum, what can they provide?
I don't know.
In terms of those coordinates and things of that, is that also collected for the purposes of location for 911 emergency?
Maybe.
Okay. You had said that, and counsel asked you a lot about validating your findings, your records, your analysis. When you are doing the training and experience, do you validate the records that are given to you by going out and finding a specific phone in the field?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be able to validate your records with other corroborating information?
Yes.
For example, a video. Would that help validate your records if the phone is seen in the video?
Yes.
If there is video or surveillance footage of locations and the phone is seen in that area, would that validate your information?
Yes.
Is, for example, on the cell phone records that have been placed in the mapping of the 772-713-9807 and going to the 248-9081, 440 to 4:52 a.m. If that phone is found at the Miramar Memorial Hospital, would that validate your findings?
Yes.
Yeah, but if it was found at the McDonald's right next to it, would that validate your findings? Come on,
Technology
man.
new?
You're going back and you're
How long
going
has it
back
been
in
around?
circles, lady. Come on, we've already gone through this for over
The
how long we've been on, man?
materials and things that you are relying upon.
Hour
How
and
long have those
26
been?
minutes of the same thing. Move on.
More than a decade.
In terms of the difference between the 2.99 and 3 to the 10th, what types of difference in
I'm gonna take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here and watching us on the stream, man. King LeBron TV. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe now. You might as well. I'm gonna be doing this almost every single day. I'm also going to be jumping on the next court case, which is probably going to be Cortland Henry's court case, which is YNW Melly's co-defendant, which is the driver of the car, which seems like they have a better case on
in
him.
terms
But
of the
this is all still going to be
distance,
streaming
it's
for you.
39
I'll be
meters
right back. We all
plus or
live.
minus
Thanks for watching.
each direction from the center of that location.
Yes.
The specific location that's plotted is based on the location of the tower.
Yes.
Is the tower a known quantity?
Yes.
Does the tower move?
No. I mean, they can, but as of the records, no.
With regards to publications and trainings and things of that nature that you rely upon, are you trained in this area?
Yes.
What types of resources and materials are you used during your training with the FBI CAST analysis?
Yeah, so instructors from Florida Institute of Technology who teach cellular theory and network engineering, network engineers from all the major service providers, other related fields, or like manufacturers, the ecosystem, and then also we have a lot of peer instruction as well.
In terms of if a child is kidnapped in Miami, are they going to call an engineer to find them?
No, they'll probably call the police or the FBI.
Council asked and brought up a lot of things about the distance and the measurements in the records. Is it possible to go through the CDRs or in the instance of the Sprint, or for example, the engineering report on the 9807 phone number, and highlight instances of exactly where on your records it corresponds with the records as provided from T-Mobile?
Yeah, we could go through line by line and say, here's the map that I made, here's how the corresponding line in the T-Mobile report is.
And in terms of the records and things that were sent to you, were they forwarded with a T-Mobile email address attached to them?
Yeah, I got them on a thumb drive, and they had the certification from T-Mobile or Sprint or whatever.
In terms of, there's a lot of discussion, I want to make sure it's clear for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you were plotting some of these particular phones, specifically the Sprint ones. Are you saying that these towers are the ones that would have been used if they were making a phone call?
No.
What are you saying?
These towers, solid phone.
Can you give any more indication on the direction or anything on that specific issue?
On the direction, you can see the side of the tower that's solid phone, but that's it.
Has this type of analysis been used to solve crimes?
Yes.
Has it been used to locate missing persons?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to object because this line of question is outside of my cross-examination.
Hey, overruled.
In terms of the data that you rely on, has it been validated in your personal experience and training?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
This witness excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Excuse me. Counsel, want to call your next witness?
Yes, Kurt Rhodes.
Good afternoon. Are you Kurt Rhodes?
Yes.
Welcome. Come on up. This is our witness stand here. When you get there, you can put your things down, remain standing, and raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you should give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your full legal name for the record.
Kurt Rhodes,
Please spell your first and last name for the court recording.
KURT-RHODES.
Thank you, sir.
Please have a seat. Mr. Rhodes, that microphone in front of you will adjust up or down, but it does not move back and forth, all right? Are you ready to proceed, sir?
Yes.
Counsel, you may.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Rhodes. How are you today?
I'm well, how are you?
Very well. Thank you for asking. Could you please introduce yourselves, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and tell them where you work?
My name is Kurt Rhodes. I am a DNA analyst. I work in the BSO Crime Laboratory as a DNA analyst.
And what are the qualifications to be an analyst in the BSO Crime Lab for DNA?
I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Forensic Science from the University of Central Florida. I have completed the Sheriff's Office training program for DNA analysts. I hold certification from the ABC for American Board of Criminalistics in molecular biology. And I am required to complete at least 8 hours of continuing education per year.
And so how long have you been employed for the Sheriff's Office?
I began in 2004 as a DNA technician. I went into DNA training in 2005 and began DNA casework in 2007.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's the difference between a DNA technician, like you were in 2005, and when you transitioned to 2004, and transitioned to 2005 to be the DNA trainee?
As a technician, I would do instrument maintenance, quality control checks on the chemicals and reagents, do ordering, record keeping, things of that nature.
So you briefly mentioned a little bit of your educational background. What types of coursework and classes did you take when you were getting your initial degree from in the sciences?
The program that I did through the UCF was the DNA-based program for forensic science. So there was genetics, molecular biology, biochemistry. There was a statistics course, mainly the coursework towards the end of the degree requirements were mainly geared towards genetics and biochemistry and molecular biology.
So do you have specialized training using statistics to interpret DNA?
I have completed the statistics in my college coursework, and I have attended courses throughout my career in the Sheriff's Office dealing with statistics and how they relate to DNA case reform.
You mentioned that you're required to do 8 hours of continuing education. Is that on a yearly basis?
Yes, per year.
And approximately how many hours of continuing education have you completed since 2005 when you started your DNA training?
It's at least 8 hours. Some of the courses, use the term loosely, range from 8 hours to 40 hours. So 1 year maybe 8 hours, another year maybe 48 or even 60. It just depends on the year.
So in terms of the DNA section that you work for, what does it do on a day-to-day basis?
As a DNA analyst, I examine evidence that's submitted by investigators in attempts to develop DNA profiles from question
Yeah,
samples.
but what evidence?
And
What
ultimately
evidence have you
compare them
tested,
to
my boy?
standards
What are you testing?
to see if the individual,
Guys don't have any evidence to test, my
the
boy.
investigator, or even the alleged victim will be included or excluded from the evidence that's submitted.
In terms of the DNA analysis,
I'm
do you
watching
do
with y'all,
that
man. I'm gonna be
yourself
right back.
hands-on?
I do.
And the training that you started to talk about, you said you started training in 2005. Could you talk and explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that training entails?
It entailed readings, hands-on processing of the samples that we did, time, extraction methods, quantitations. There was written tests as well as a mock court. Then there was it ended with a competency test to ensure that I was able to process samples appropriately, and then I was allowed to do supervised casework, and then finally independent casework.
So let's explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is a competency test?
A competency test is given to an analyst after they have completed a training program for whatever subject. It could be as simple as an extraction method or maybe a quantitation method. So the laboratory will then provide a test that the analyst would conduct. They would process this test and return the results to the agency to see if the results that they've gotten were appropriate for what was given.
And do you have to pass these competency tests or examinations before moving on to the next steps?
The competency tests are done to ensure that you are competent in the technology that is going to be employed in the casework.
So once you pass
For the visionaries, for the trailblazers, for the last to leave, and the first to think ahead, there's Grainger. Supplies and solutions for every industry, and 24/7 support. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The agency will purchase proficiency tests from a provider. I process them, generate my results, my answers, and those are then sent back to the provider to ensure that I'm getting the correct answers.
Are those done in-house in terms of the scoring and completion of that proficiency testing twice a year?
I process it in-house, it's reviewed, and then it's sent back to the test provider.
Does the proficiency test require and include statistical interpretations?
They do.
And has the statistical interpretations changed as the way they've been doing in the field of DNA over the last couple of years?
In my laboratory, yes. It went from statistical calculation with known as random match probabilities, single source samples, and CPIs, which were combined probability of inclusion. We've transitioned from those two methods to a likelihood ratio method.
And can you explain, in as simple of terms as possible, what is a likelihood ratio?
A likelihood ratio is a comparison of two hypotheses. Hypothesis 1 compared against hypothesis 2. In terms of casework analysis, the initial hypothesis is that a person is included as a contributor to a sample, and the competing hypothesis is that the evidence or the DNA profile is coming from an unrelated unknown individual. So that is how the likelihood ratio is set up. Person one, or person of interest, is the contributor to the evidence versus it's coming from an unknown, unrelated individual.
Okay. So I want to go back, and so can you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you're doing a DNA analysis, what is it that you're looking for?
For the analysis that I'm doing, I am processing for STRs, or short tandem repeats. These are small fragments of DNA that are located in our DNA genome. They repeat a certain number of times. When I first began DNA casework, I was processing 15 STRs plus the MW2 or sex determining marker, and now the technology has gone to 24 STRs.
So when you say short tandem repeat or STRs, do they code for something like eye color or hair color?
These are non-coding fragments of DNA.
Why is it important to look at those areas as opposed to eye color?
The locations that we're testing, or that I'm testing for, the locations that I'm processing, they're robust. They're polymorphic, meaning that there are differences. There's not just one or two variations. There could be 10 to 12 different variations, and they are independent from each other, meaning that the result that I get at location 1 will not affect the result that I would get at location 2, or the DNA profile at location 1 isn't affected by the DNA profile of location 2.
Is that a genetic marker? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And just so it's clear, can you define exactly what a genetic marker is from the DNA analyst perspective?
As it relates to what I do, it is the STL, the short tandem repeat. That is the specific DNA fragment or DNA marker that I am processing and testing for.
Can you explain what an allele is?
The allele is the genetic trait or characteristic. In terms of STRs, as I mentioned, they're short fragments of DNA that repeat. So they're measured in numbers. At location, I'm just going to say location 1, an allele or characteristic of gene may be a 7, or an 8, or a 9, or an 11. So a DNA profile that I generate is actually just a series of numbers based off of the alleles or traits that I obtain at each DNA location.
You said they're identified by numbers. What does that mean? Could you explain, like, where the numbers, what do you say? Is it 274? Is it 11?
As I mentioned, the 7, 8, or 9, that refers to the number of repeats. So with the STRs, it's a repeated fragment of DNA, ATCG, and that ATCG may repeat a certain number of times. It may repeat 7 times, or 8 times, or 9 times. And so that is what those numbers that I'm expressing represent.
And where does that repeat? How does that show up in a person's individual DNA?
It is located on the DNA chromosome.
And what determines what makes up an individual's DNA chromosome?
In the case of humans, our DNA is inherited from our parents. We receive half of our DNA from our mother and half from our father. And with the exception of identical twins, no two individuals are going to share the exact same DNA.
In terms of your casework and the DNA process that you do, has that been validated?
Yes,
Is the Broward Sheriff's Office Crime Lab accredited?
it is.
And by what outside accredited body?
We're accredited by ANAB, or the ANSI National Accreditation Board.
What's the purpose of maintaining an accreditation as a lab?
The accreditation is a voluntary process. The accrediting board will do an audit on our laboratory. It will check our SOPs, or standard operating procedures, to ensure that we are doing proper record keeping, we are following the procedures that we have in place, and that the laboratory is essentially running as it is supposed to be according to the SOPs.
And in terms of the specific areas in which the lab is accredited for, are you only talking on DNA?
It's accredited in 4 different sections: DNA, firearms, chemistry, and fingerprints.
Have you worked in any of those other sections?
I have not.
In terms of the proficiency testing that we talked about earlier, is that also part of the accreditation process?
Yes, everything that is done in the laboratory will be audited through the accrediting body.
And is there also accreditation and validation in terms of statistics that are used?
Again, it's part of the audits.
You mentioned that you used to do 15 areas plus antigen, and now you're at 24 areas. Can you explain what made that change occur?
The DNA analysis is a science, and as the years go on, the science advances. So the companies that provide these commercial kits are able to make combinations of these STRs in a bigger multiplex, that's what it's identified as, to analyze more DNA locations all at once in order to provide a better picture compared to years prior when it may have only been 9 locations.
With regards to the locations, does the software take into account the frequency then, or the number of times a particular repeat is found in a population?
I'm not sure of your question.
And previously, when you were doing random population, random maps, or CPI, is it important to know how frequently a specific allele was shown up in a population of individuals?
Yes. At the end of the analysis, if I am, let me start over again. After I look at the evidentiary samples, I'll determine if it's a single source profile or a mixture, and then do a comparison to a known standard. If I am going to report that the known standard is included as a contributor, I am required to give a weight to this. And in order to give a weight to this match or inclusion, I am required to provide a statistical calculation. So years prior, as I mentioned, it was RMP or CPI. We've gone to glycolates now. But all of those different calculations or those statistics are based on allele frequencies. And what that means is those STR markers that I mentioned before occur in the population at different frequencies. So I mentioned allele 8 may occur at a frequency of 25% of the population has it. And allele 7 may occur at 15%. So when I do a statistical calculation with all of the alleles present in the DNA profile compared to the standard, all of those frequencies are used to calculate the end result, whether it's an LR, a CPI, or an RMP.
So while you change your method, you're still using a lot of the same and building on the same items that you've used in the past.
Yes, that's right.
Has the likelihood ratio, LR, been validated for statistical analysis?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about how in the lab you prevent any sort of cross-contamination?
When I process evidence, I am processing one case at a time, and when I refer to that, screening evidence. So the initial step is to look at the evidence that I am receiving from our central evidence supply to ensure that the seals were intact. I will do an inventory of the evidence compared to the submission form and property receipts. Typically, the items are packaged all together in kind of like a big brown bag. I'll open that bag up and do an inventory. And then again, process one evidentiary sample at a time while leaving the other samples in a drawer or a cabinet.
What do you do in between each sample to your workstation?
And the workstation is cleaned with bleach and alcohol. As I'm doing my screening, I do wear a lab coat, gloves. I work in what's called a dead air box, a big plexiglass box about the size of this bench here. And I do all my processing on the bench. I'll clean that up, After I'm done with the evidence, change my gloves, and then move on to the next piece of evidence. When the next step would be extraction, which would be after I've taken my sample and my cutting of this evidence, I place it into a tube and try and elute out or purify any DNA present that's on that sample. At that point, I'm working little test tubes. So I would again be changing gloves, wearing a lab coat, a mask, and I would only be working with one sample at a time, or only open it one sample at a time to avoid sample contamination.
In terms of, you mentioned the test tubes, are those sealed?
Yes.
So you talked about how you get evidence and it's brought to you. Does the lab assign a specific case number at the lab to track all items of evidence and samples?
Yes. When the investigator brings the evidence to the evidence window or the central receiving, there's a property receipt in the submission form that's brought in and accepted by the evidence intake unit, and it is given a laboratory number.
When you receive evidence, you mentioned you check the seals. Why do you do that?
I check the seals. It's an indication if the evidence has been tampered with. There is a chain of custody form with property receipt, and it lists who had custody of the evidence, and then basically from which person to which person it's transferred to.
And where is the evidence stored before
We
you
back,
go
my
into
bad.
it?
We back though.
For the most times,
Here we
it
go.
is stored in the evidence vault. There's some cases
I've been
where the evidence
watching.
intake unit keeps it up front in their area, in the safe. But the majority of times, they have an evidence vault in which I go to retrieve the evidence.
So we've talked a lot about DNA and kind of the process leading up to that. What about serology? Is that a part of your job as well?
Serology is one of the first steps that I do when screening the evidence. With each case that's submitted, there's an evidence submission form. It gives me an idea of the type of evidence that I'm going to be processing. Sexual assaults. Years prior, I would screen for semen, looking for sperm cells. Maybe the case has indications of blood, at which point I would do presumptive testing for blood. Items of evidence are submitted where the investigator is just looking for what's essentially called
That's
contact
pretty much all the
DNA,
evidence
where
they've shown
an
so
individual
far,
might
ladies and
come
gentlemen.
into contact with maybe an item left.
It's just been phone data,
There's no
phone
real
data,
strategy to do on that one.
tracking.
I would just take cuttings of the samples.
So, Mr. Rhodes, I want to make
Pretty
sure
much.
it's clear. Is it your job to go out and collect DNA evidence?
No, I do not do any of the collection. The evidence is submitted and I retrieve it from the evidence vault.
Do you give any advice on where to collect evidence from?
I do not.
Have you ever been any training in crime scene or evidence collection?
I have.
In terms of your employment at the sheriff's office, have you ever worked outside of the forensic DNA section?
I have not.
How many times approximately have you done the DNA analysis process we're going to talk about?
I was processing about 100 cases per year. I would say roughly 2 to 3 samples per case, so maybe 200 to 300 samples per year for a good 10 years. So thousands of samples in processing.
And in that time, have you had the opportunity to testify in court?
I've testified in Broward County about 40 times and in the federal district 3 times.
Here, offer to defense for law matter?
No need, no objection.
Proceed, Gus.
Okay, so I want to start with, in this particular case, did you do DNA analysis?
I didn't.
Could you please describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the step-by-step process you go through? You started talking a little bit about extraction. You could pick up there and continue.
So again, the first step would be a screening of the evidence to collect my samples, which I would then put in 2 small, essentially test tubes, little microcentrifuge tubes. I would add reagents or chemicals to the tube in order to elute out any potential DNA that's present on the sample and to purify any DNA that may be present in that cutting.
Should we approach for just one moment?
Yes.
Pretty much. He's describing what DNA is and what his job title is and what he's required to do. Yeah, they've yet to put out anything to make us understand why we're watching this still. Unfortunately for all parties involved, there's just not enough evidence. I do not know what's going on.
Thank you.
There goes Melly. You don't got that famous turtleneck everybody talking about on today.
Thank you. Let the record reflect the jury step down. Counsel remain along with the defendant. Our witness remains on the stand. Is everything all right?
Yeah, we just need a moment.
Okay. You need a restroom break, Mr. Devens? Yes? Can we arrange that for Mr. Devens, please?
Yes, Judge.
All right, we'll be in recess. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could tell the witness why we're taking a break.
Wow. Here we go again.
They were being loud.
We're in recess.
I object to this. They're telling me.
What is that?
I said no.
Oh, I thought you.
No, I said no.
What is going on with this lady today? Hey, yo, man, listen, man. I sat through cell phone records.
Thanks for coming back to the Law and Crime Network, YNW.
I sat through.
Melly, the prosecution says he's a double murderer. His trial is going on right now, and on the
I
stand
sat
for
through
the prosecution is a DNA analyst. His name is Kurt Rhodes. Let's go into court.
2 hours of
In my laboratory, yes.
2 hours of witnesses talking about absolutely nothing.
Match probabilities, single source samples,
Nothing.
and CPIs, which were.
What's up, everyone? I'm off.
I promise you guys that as of right now, the only evidence against Melly is
What is a likelihood ratio?
the only evidence against Melly right now is that he got in the car. That's it. That's all they got. He hopped in the car. He was in the back seat of the car. He hopped in. That's all they have so far. And then
Person is included as a contributor to a sample, and the competing hypothesis is that the evidence or the DNA profile.
And then they got this guy, Kurt Rhodes, whatever this guy's name is, DNA analyst, that he's talking about analyzing DNA, right?
Is the contributor to the evidence versus it's coming from an unknown, unrelated individual.
Right. So he was set there to talk about DNA, but the DNA doesn't, like, Melly's DNA isn't included in his testimony.
For the analysis that I'm doing, I am processing for STRs, or short tandem repeats. These are small fragments of DNA that are located in our DNA genome. They repeat a certain number of times. When I first began DNA casework,
Definitely not illegal to
I
get in
was
the car,
processing
bro.
15
Facts.
STRs plus the MW2 or
We do it every day, bro. We hop in cars with people every day.
Technology
You never
has
know what they did
gone
before
to
they got to
24
us. We don't know what they did after they
So when
dropped
you
us
say
off.
short tandem repeat or STRs, do they code for something like eye color or hair color?
These are non-coding fragments of DNA.
Why is it important to look at those areas as opposed to eye color?
The locations that we're testing, or that I'm testing for, the locations that I'm processing.
Okay, this isn't live anymore. This is something that's already happened. So, pretty much, all right. Anybody that knows how to draw a picture is gonna take what she's put out already as her forms of evidence. So she focused primarily on cell phone records, cell phone towers, all that good stuff. Then now she's trying to give the jury an explanation of DNA how they find the DNA, what they look for, and what they exclude in those examinations. So at this point, they probably have something of Melly's in the car. He was in the car. So yeah, they probably have his hair strand or strain or, you know, some kind of DNA from Melly in the car. He was in the car. We know that. We know he was in the car. You already showed us that the first day in the video. You showed us him leaving the studio and jumping in the car. Like someone said over here, it's not illegal to jump in the car. You can't prosecute someone based on, oh, he jumped in the car. Then secondly, the cell phone stuff is just, bro, it's opinionated, man. You can't pinpoint where this man was at. You can't pinpoint where he went afterwards because how wide of a range cell phone towers are spread apart and how radio signals function, man, where they go from one place to another. It's just all hearsay, bro. Maybe he was there, or he could have been there. He could have did this. He could have did that. And because they broke this case up from, they broke the case up from him and his buddy, you know, it's kind of like we're only getting one side of a story with no evidence. So it's like we don't know. If Cortland Henry was a part of this case, bro, you would have so much more information. It seems. But we don't. And these guys are literally going on here and they're testifying the stuff that they don't have any information on, bro. It makes no sense. I don't understand why the judges, why they're prolonging that or this testimony. From what I understand, she's about to drop a bomb with some information. So I don't know, maybe this elongated testimony of how DNA is broken down and how cell phones and radio signals are broken down. She has some kind of fucking plan that I don't see. I don't know. I don't know. Y'all tell me. Y'all watch it. You give me your opinions. That's why we got the chat. Give me your opinions.
Repeated fragment of DNA.
His lawyer's getting paid to do nothing. Yeah, that's a fact. I said that earlier.
A certain number of times. They repeat 7 times.
That's a fact. Listen, that's what I said earlier, bro. I don't even think the defense attorneys have had a chance to show what they really got.
And where
really
does
haven't
that
had to do nothing.
repeats? How does that show up in a person's individual DNA?
It is located on the DNA chromosome.
And what determines what makes up an individual's DNA chromosome?
In the case of humans, our DNA is inherited from our parents. We receive half of our DNA from our mother.
Get that on Wikipedia, bro.
And with the exception of identical twins, no two individuals are going to share the exact same DNA.
In terms of your casework and the DNA process that you do, has that been validated?
Yes.
Is the Broward Sheriff's Office Crime Lab accredited?
It is.
And by what outside accredited body?
We're accredited by ANAB for the ANSI National Accreditation.
Yeah, that's a fact.
What's the purpose of maintaining an accreditation as a lab?
That's a fact. When you haven't been presented any evidence, there's really nothing to defend. So.
Do an audit on a laboratory.
And like I said, once again, man, I'm really not on any side, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's fucked up what happened to those kids, but it's also fucked up that they might send this kid to they might give this kid the death penalty, and we don't even know if he really did it or not. Or, you know, if he was capable of doing it, or if he was even in the area when it supposedly went down. They don't know anything.
Are you only talking on DNA?
It's accredited in 4 different sections: DNA, firearms, chemistry, and fingerprints.
Have you worked in any of those other sections?
I have not.
In terms of the proficiency testing that we talked about earlier, is that also part of the accreditation process?
Yes. Everything that is done.
To me, it feels like they're taking any attempt they could at YNW Melly because he's obviously the famous one, and
Again, it's part of.
If they miss this shot, they got Cortland Henry to fall to make it all fall on. So
15 areas plus analysis.
I mean, I don't know what else. I really don't know what else she got
What made that change occur?
going on.
The DNA analysis is a science, and as the years go on, the science advances. So the companies that provide these commercial kits are able to make combinations of these STRs in a bigger multiplex. That's what it's.
Yo, and then they were in an area that
Prosecution hasn't gotten to the substance of the DNA yet. That gives us time to take a quick break here at the Law and Crime Network.
yeah, they're on break right now. That's another thing that I didn't understand. Like, they were in an area where there was a LA Fitness, a McDonald's. I mean, shit, just think about your general area. Don't even think about where they're at. If you go anywhere in your area and there's a LA Fitness, a McDonald's, and a bunch of stores around you, it's normally a nice populated area, which, yeah, maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning didn't have nobody out there, but you got cameras everywhere. I know here they do. In most cities they do. In these places, you got cameras everywhere nowadays. I'm surprised that all they have is a view of them flying past, one car flying past the hospital and the other car turning into the hospital. Oh, and them leaving the studio. That's the only video they have on I mean, that they've shown so far throughout this whole time. So it's like, that's also odd to me. If you look at the map where they were talking about the cell phone service and all the towers and where everything was pinging off of, man, that's not a rural route area. That was like a little city area. They had like a little, they had a grocery store, they had a McDonald's, they had a LA Fitness, gas stations, all in that area. So it's like, no cameras at all? Nowhere? I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just been a very long time, bro. 4 years for you to be presenting this kind of evidence don't make no sense. Doesn't make any sense. I was covering the Casanova case. I don't know if y'all know who Casanova is, but he's from New York. Most of the rappers from New York, when they come get them, they already got them slayed, bro. They have video, they have evidence, they have wiretaps, they have witnesses, snitches. They literally have you locked in. Like, I mean, locked in. When they come get you, you're already done. If they're looking for you, they already got you. That's why I'm so surprised with this one. It's like, it don't make no sense. Normally when the feds come get you, they got you. Like, they got the evidence. They're pinning you to the wall. But on this one, it's like they just been dropping the ball, bro. Like, she's been focusing on something totally different. Maybe she's focusing on Cortland Henry, bro. Maybe this, I don't know, man. Here we go. That's no sound on them. I don't know what's going on there.
This is just an example of
There we go.
for demonstrative purposes.
Could you make some jokes while you're up here?
Let me know if y'all can hear that. I don't want to blast it through y'all's stuff.
You ready?
One in a row. First one.
While we're waiting, I want to say that the DSO officers that are in this courtroom have been very cooperative and helpful, and I thank them all, except for Gary, of course.
Uh-oh.
Call the guy with the AC.
Everybody's laughing over here.
Getting Gary over here. We
I don't know, bruh.
That side of the table. This side, nah.
Maybe they don't know that we're watching.
Huh? I don't blame you.
Somebody nudge them like, yo, we on, my boy. We on, my boy. No, I get that. I get that. The cameras wouldn't have made no, no difference as far as like evidence wise. What I'm saying is, in that populated area, there were no cameras, and if there were even
I understand, Counsel,
more
I
views.
overheard you said you're going to use a
You
demonstrative.
could try to paint
Yes,
a
I
picture.
showed it to defense counsel
What they
already.
giving us, we
And I have
can't
no
even paint a
objection.
picture, bro. We can't even paint a picture. I still can't
you'll
put it
give
in my
that
mind that this
instruction
kid
on
was
the
sitting in the back seat, turned and popped this man. I really,
Thank you.
I don't know. In the car, and then there's no gunshot residue in the back seat. I mean, not back seat. There was no gunshot residue on Melly. They also didn't find his clothes. So, homie did pull up. I think the defense is about to attack said witness right now. Melly probably on Instagram. Yo, pull up my Instagram. Yo, pull up my Insta, bruh.
Jury entering?
Oh yeah, and understand too, Pa, that nowadays they don't even gotta prove motive, my boy. They don't gotta prove motive. They literally could try you without motive, bro. It's crazy. Just like them little law changes where they don't even have to have 12 jurors anymore decide, bro. It's 8 now. They only need 8 to say you guilty now.
Let the record once again
It's
reflect
crazy.
the presence of the jury, defendants, his counsel, the assistant attorney, or witness remains on stand, and we'll vote that his counsel you're going to be able to continue with your direct examination. Is that correct?
Correct, Your Honor. So,
Correct, you may proceed.
thank you.
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
that still
Rhodes.
hasn't come
Okay,
out
we
yet.
talked
They
about
gonna
you
get to that,
discussed
too.
what is extraction.
They gonna get to the drive-by portion of
Did you complete your
this.
discussion of what is the extraction?
We just trying to get
step
past.
I'm not sure. Extraction
Whatever
is when
this-
I'm
this
trying
is.
to elute out and purify any potential DNA present in the samplings or cuttings that I've taken from the evidence. The next step would be quantitation, and that would be to determine how much DNA present, if any, is in the DNA extract, to then target a specific optimized amount of DNA for the amplification. Amplification is where I'm now going to be targeting those STRs, or short tandem repeats, through a process called PCR, or polymerase chain reaction, in order to make a detectable amount of DNA from that DNA extract, so that I could then go on to the last step of instrumentation, which is the detection phase using capillary electrophoresis.
So I'm going to go back and we talked about the PCRs, the polymerase chain reaction. Does that change the underlying DNA sample in any way?
It does not. It's simply there to make a amount of DNA that can be detectable on an instrument.
And why do you do that?
That is the basis for the DNA typing that I do.
And the PCR typing that you're talking about, how long has that been used?
That's been for several decades. It's used in mass disaster identifications, paternity testing, in the medical field.
How long has the process of DNA analysis and identification?
Nah, man. Look, man. It's
Again, it's been decades.
if we caught a case
STRs came
today,
around
if they say,
in
yo,
the
you had to
90s,
make a decision today,
late 90s,
guilty, not guilty,
so for 30 plus years,
I wouldn't be able to call him
PCR has been
guilty.
employed.
So
Can,
I don't
again,
know what they.
It's been a little while since high school biology.
I don't know if they have some.
Can you explain how
They have
DNA
something in the
comes
works
to
that's
an
coming
individual
out, or they
person?
about to drop something. I
As I
really
mentioned,
don't know,
you
man.
receive half from your mother, half from your father. The woman has the egg, and the man has the spermatozoa. Each of those cells has half from each parent, and it combines to form the child.
So is it always the first allele in any allele pair always comes from mom, and the second one always comes from dad?
No. So the way that the allele table is organized is the smallest allele or number comma, the biggest allele
Oh my
number.
goodness.
I would only know which allele came from which parent by doing a comparison to the known parents. But there's things called recombination that take place during reproduction. So it's basically just a random sampling of the parents' DNA when those reproductive cells are formed to then make the offspring.
In terms of your DNA analysis, do you take into account siblings?
Siblings do come up from time to time. The best way would be to request a standard for comparison.
With regards
They're
to
explaining DNA now.
a sibling, or if you thought a sibling was involved, is that something you could tell from the data?
Wow.
There is significant sharing between siblings. So if an analyst, myself, or any of my coworkers comes across a case where there is the potential that there could be a sibling, that information can be relayed to the investigator.
And I want to talk about, so it's clear, what is a standard when it comes to DNA?
A standard is a sample that's collected from a known individual. As I mentioned early on, the purpose of my analysis is to compare evidentiary or question samples collected at an alleged crime scene to a known standard or to a known person to see if that person is included or excluded as a contributor to any DNA left, again, at the potential scene.
In terms of how you're expressing your conclusion, are you expressing it in terms of it's more likely to be this individual than an unknown, unrelated individual?
Very similar, very close. I issue reports, and the wording is that the evidentiary sample is X times more likely to have originated from the person of interest than if it had originated from an unknown, unrelated individual. And when those samples become mixtures, then it becomes a little bit more wordy. That's the intent of it.
So going into, you talked about the unknowns and the standards. Is that related to you in some form when the evidence is presented to you?
Yes, it has to be.
Why is that important?
It's important so that I know exactly what evidence is questioned and what is the standard. The evidentiary samples are processed separately from the known samples to avoid any sort of
This is pretty much blah blah blah, common sense, blah blah blah, common sense.
Separate times,
You can
you
Google
define
that
that relating to
or
the jury, so what you do to separate
Come
them.
on, man.
I will process the question samples first, and then I do work in extraction batches. So several cases of question samples will be extracted, amplified, and put on the instrument together. And then I'll work a set of known samples, again, separate from the question samples at different times and spaces.
Is it separate by days?
Not always, but there are chances, or there are times where it is separated by days, but it's definitely separated by time.
So the last step of the process that you were talking about, the capillary electrophoresis. What is that?
That is the step where I put the amplification product. I take a small portion of the amplification product and inject it onto an instrument. And what that's doing is
Alright, if you're in the chat, you've been watching just like I have. Could y'all tell me what DNA they're talking about here?
From that amplification. And it runs through a little thin, tiny straw.
A little thin, tiny straw. Yeah, but what did you test? What DNA did you
fragments
test?
are separated by the size, because all of the STRs have to be detectable, and they all can't be the same size. So as they migrate through this capillary or little tiny straw, there is a fluorescent tag that is present on each of these DNA fragments. A laser will excite that fluorescent tag, it emits light, and that light is captured. But again, the DNA fragments migrate or travel through that little capillary based on the size. The smaller ones will migrate faster, and the larger ones will migrate slower.
Is this captured in some sort of a chart or diagram that's then presented?
The samples are collected and then they're analyzed through a program, and then I do have printouts. They're called electropharograms.
So with Your Honor's permission for a demonstrative as to what an electropharogram looks like.
Is there any objection?
No objection.
Wow.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, the witness will be using a demonstrative to assist in explaining or illustrating his testimony. Please remember that the testimony of the witness is the evidence. However, the demonstrative is not to be considered by you as evidence in the case
Okay, here we
unless
go.
it's later received in evidence, and
I
it should
believe
not be
this is
used
our
as a
first-
substitute for evidence. Only
First
items
piece of
received,
evidence.
will be available to you for consideration during your deliberation. So at this time, this is not in evidence, it's demonstrative.
Mr. Rhodes, can you... May I, Your Honor? Mr. Rhodes, can you explain kind of what this chart is?
So this is an electropharogram. This is one of the pages. They're typically on 2 or 3 pages based on whether it's a single source or a mixture profile. As you see across the top, there's some red boxes. And
So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier
Sure.
to see.
there's these red boxes.
That's red,
and
bro?
then you'll see a bunch of letters and numbers.
I'm
to the-
colorblind as hell, but
to
I
the left,
know
you
that
see
ain't red, dog.
D8S 1179. That is one location that I am testing for.
I don't know
It's
what
on the
color
8th
that is,
chromosome.
but that ain't red.
Would call it D8 for short. And as you go across to the right, you'll see D21 for short, D18 for short. And these are the locations, or these are the specific STRs that I'm analyzing.
In terms of you said it's a D8, is that the address of where this STR is located?
That's essentially what that is. It's the location on the chromosome, the 8th chromosome, and then the S1179 gives a more specific location on where it's located.
Can you describe that like in terms of a house address? If the address is 123 Main Street of a house, how would that correspond that to what you're looking at here?
The best I can do is, again, it's on D8 would mean that's DNA on the 8th chromosome, and the S1179 gives a more specific location on that chromosome. Again, we have 23 chromosomes, so there are multiple chromosomes.
And do you test and sequence every single marker on every single chromosome when you're doing DNA analysis?
No, it is only the select set of STRs that is used for each specific commercial kit. And in this particular kit, I use what's called global filer.
And what is global filer?
This specific DNA kit used for these STRs.
And how many specific locations are you testing for in global filer?
There are 24.
So in terms of the specific evidence that you did in this case, I want to kind of just go in order with your reports, if that's okay.
I thought that was my computer.
The items that were submitted to you and processed on that. I'm going to start with the lab number items 16 and 17. If you need to refer to your report.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so items 16 and 17. Was there a description attached to those items?
There was.
And where do you get the description from?
The description comes from the property receipt as well as the evidence packaging.
If there is a discrepancy between the property receipt and the evidence packaging, do you note that?
Yes.
So starting with 16 and 17, what description were you given as to where that swab originated?
These are oral swabs coming from Cortland Henry. Item 16 is the right side, and item 17 is the left side.
I knew we
So you
were
test
getting
both
to
of them?
that.
I did not. I tested one.
Why don't you test both of them?
It's a buccal swab or oral swab coming from the same individual. There's not going to be a difference in DNA based off the left side of his cheek or the right side of his cheek.
So when you test item 16, can you explain to ladies and gentlemen and the jury how you go through that process?
It is, again, what I mentioned before. I would screen it, do an extraction, quantify it, do an amplification, and then develop the DNA profile and use it as a DNA standard for Mr. Henry.
Moving on to item number 18. Did you test and that particular item develop a DNA profile?
I did.
And the DNA profile assigned to item number 18 was what?
It is a DNA spot card from Christopher Thomas.
And in terms of what is a DNA spot card?
It's a blood stain collection card taken from the medical examiner.
And as to item number 19, the next item, did you test and develop a DNA standard or profile from item 19?
I did.
And what was that?
It was a DNA spot card from Mr. Anthony Williams.
Going forward to item number 20, what was that?
It was identified as swab from water bottle PM number 18.
Do you know where that water bottle was?
I do not.
Did you do the DNA analysis on that particular item?
I did, yes.
And can you explain what conclusions you drew on that item?
The DNA profile obtained from item number 20 was uninterpretable due to insufficient data.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what does it mean with insufficient data?
After I do the analysis,
I thought they was gonna say that was Melly's DNA on the
DNA
water bottle.
products after I run through calculated electrophoresis and look at the electrophoregram, I look at the data and I have to determine, is there enough data to determine the number of contributors? Is this a single source profile? Is this a two-person profile? Or a two-person mixture? Is it three-person? After looking at the results, I deemed that there wasn't enough information to even determine how many number of contributors were in the profile. So I deemed it insufficient or uninterpretable.
So does that mean there wasn't DNA there?
Could be multiple people drank the same water.
There was DNA, but I was unable to make any sort of comparison.
You mentioned that you have to determine the number of contributors. What would help you determine the number of contributors to a DNA item?
The number of contributors, it's based off of the DNA results. One of the things that I look at is the number of alleles.
Pay attention to the shit she says,
As I
guys,
mentioned,
man.
we
Like,
receive half of our
I
DNA
think
from
she's throwing like subliminals under her
specific
questions
location.
for
I
future
would expect to only find a maximum of 2 different alleles
scenarios she
per
might bring up.
location. So if I'm looking at, let's say, D8, as you had seen, and there was 3 alleles or 3 different peaks present, it's a pretty good indication that it's coming from at least 2 individuals. If I had seen 4 peaks or 4 alleles, maybe 5 alleles, now there's a potential that there's 3 people that could be contributing to this profile. And after I do an overall analysis of the entire electrophoregram, I will then come to a determination of whether it's 2 or 3.
Wow.
So when you're said overall, do you look at each area or each address that you're looking at individually?
Individually first, and then overall to get the final interpretation.
And is that something you have training and experience in doing?
Yes.
How often do you have to analyze mixtures as part of your DNA casework?
Mixtures usually come up, I would say, at least half of the time, and DNA samples that are processed.
So going on to what was labeled for your DNA report as item number 21, what was that listed as?
It's listed as swab from spent casing laser 40 S&W PM number 18.
Were you able to
They don't even know what kind of gun
from
was used.
item
They know it
number
was
21?
40 caliber or 9mm.
Why not?
There wasn't sufficient DNA present in the extract to obtain DNA results on the electrophoregram after I did the amplification.
Okay, going on to item number 22. What was that described as?
Swab from Gucci sandals, PM number 19.
On number 22, were you able to determine the contributors on that particular swab?
That result was interpreted as a mixture originating from 3 contributors.
And were you able to identify the 3 contributors?
I was not.
In terms of, are you able to say and give a statistic as to each of the 3 individuals that you identified on item 22 as to their likelihood of being a contributor to that mixture?
Yes, so every sample that is deemed to be conclusive or whether interpretable single source mixture, I would then do a comparison to any known samples submitted. So each of the 3 individuals were compared against this mixture.
And were you able to determine whether or not you can give support to Christopher Thomas being included in that mixture?
Yes, the DNA results are 4,730 times more likely if they originated from Christopher Thomas and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals. And this provides moderate support that Christopher Thomas is included as a contributor.
So this is the first time the ladies and gentlemen of the jury have heard moderate support. Can you explain what the verbal qualifiers are that you're going to be testifying and using to describe the DNA results?
Yes, the likelihood ratio can go from really small numbers. Sorry, the resulting likelihood ratio number can go from really small to really large. So I will have a verbal qualifier listed on the report, and it goes from limited support, moderate support, strong support, and very strong support. And this tries to give a scale to the number that you're hearing.
And so the numbers that you're going to be talking about are exponential at sometimes.
That's correct.
If it's the opposite direction, if it's an exclusion, what type of number, what type of words would you be using?
If it's an exclusion, which is really
They got all
there's
those.
a chance that
They got all those things on the table that say evidence, 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 evidence,
It would be
evidence.
limited support for exclusion, or it would just be a straight exclusion with no verbal qualifier.
And I still haven't heard any.
So going back
Real
to
evidence.
item 22, you said moderate support as to Christopher Thomas.
That's correct.
Okay. And did you also analyze that with regards to the individual that was identified as Anthony Williams?
I did, yes.
And so what was the likelihood ratio that Anthony Williams was a contributor to the DNA found on those samples?
The DNA results are at least 3.07 times 10 to the 25th, or 30.7 septillion. Times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
With regards to the individual that was identified as Cortland Henry, what conclusions were you able to draw with regards to him and that DNA sample?
He was excluded as a contributor.
So you said 30.7 septillion. How many zeros is that?
There are 25 zeros after the 3.
Why is it that you don't say
Dry eyes
it's
commercial.
Anthony Williams, Chris Thomas, and
I
some
feel you,
unknown
bro. I was just about to do the same
individual?
thing.
Sometimes that is reported if it's requested. The likelihood ratio that I'm reporting out now is done on an individual basis. So I would conduct or calculate the likelihood ratio of the first individual, report the number, do a likelihood calculation of the second individual, report the number, and if it's requested, an additional calculation can be done and reported in which both individuals would be included in the mixture.
So I want to make sure it's clear. You're looking at each contributor individually,
Yes.
and that is because it's the hypothesis is either how many times more likely that they are versus that they are not included.
Damn.
Could you say that again?
You're making me do math. So with regards to the likelihood ratio, the first hypothesis
You're making me do math.
is the number that you come out with, or the number you're reporting. If it is the 30.7 septillion times more likely that they are included, that's the first hypothesis, that they are there and they are a contributor. The second hypothesis is that they are not.
Come on, man.
So you're saying that it is 30.7 times, 30.7 septillion times more likely they are a contributor than they are not. Than they are excluded.
Sort of. I would explain it as, again, these likelihood ratios are, it's a calculation that's going against two competing hypotheses. So there is more support that Mr. Williams, in this case, would be included along with two other unknown, unrelated individuals than if the DNA results were coming from three unrelated, unknown individuals.
And so for item 22, the swab from the Gucci sandals you had testified Portland Henry was excluded.
That's correct.
Moving on to item number 23. What was that?
It's listed as a cutting blood stain on front of T-shirt. Drew, I'm not sure how to say this. Drew Film Medic.
Really beaming right now.
CG10.
Okay, going on to item number 23. The cutting from the front of the T-shirt. What were your results on that?
The DNA results were interpreted as a mixture originating from two contributors.
Okay.
After doing the comparisons to each individual, the DNA results are at least 982 times more likely if they originated from Christopher Thomas and one unrelated unknown individual than if they originated from two unrelated individuals. And this provides moderate support that Mr. Thomas is included as a contributor.
And then with regards to Anthony Williams.
The DNA results are 3.22 times 10 to the 25th, or 32.2 septillion. Times more likely if they originated from Mr. Williams and one unrelated unknown individual than if they originated from two unrelated individuals. And this provides very strong support that Mr. Williams is included as a contributor.
Nelly is tired, bro.
982.
He like he about to pass
and
out.
32.2 septillion. That's a big difference.
Yes.
I need y'all to get me a coffee, dog. That's what he's saying. I need y'all to get me a coffee, bro. I'm about to pass out.
In terms of identifying and making a conclusion based on that,
What she wrote on that piece of paper.
is there anything that you take into account as to the amount
Zoom in
of
on
DNA
that.
that's in there?
Zoom in on that cameraman. We need that, dog.
The DNA mixtures that are
We need an exclusive, bruh.
in the laboratory that I analyze.
Come on.
I use a program called StarMix, or STRMix. And this is a program that helps to deconvolute these mixtures. And what deconvolute means is to determine if you have two contributors in the mixture, are you able to tease out or generate essentially who the first contributor would be compared to who the second contributor would be. As the amount of DNA is increased in these DNA extracts and these amplification products,
We gonna stick this
the
one out,
result
man.
becomes more robust, and you would have a more solid
We gonna be the ones that know it live.
comparison, or an easier comparison, maybe that might be the right word. If you have a full single source DNA profile, it's a lot easier to compare to a standard than if you had a really partial DNA profile. And once you start compounding that into a mixture, if you have essentially two partial DNA profiles mixing into one stain, which would then make this partial two-person mixture, doing comparisons may lead to likelihood ratios that are on the lower side, versus if you had two robust DNA profiles or two robust DNA sources of DNA making a mixture, and then the likelihood ratios may result in a number that's far larger and more support for the inclusion.
Okay, so I want to make sure it's clear. If you have 1 gallon of blood from one individual and 1 drop of blood from another individual,
God.
is that still, you can get out 2 profiles?
There is a potential to this. But again, it depends on the overall result.
Would that come across in the data that you're looking at?
Absolutely.
And how would that read out in the data?
When I look at a DNA profile, mixture profile, you can see, or oftentimes you can see that there is one contributor that is contributing or providing more genetic material to the mixture versus the second contributor or third contributor. So you'll see differences in the peak heights or the alleles or the characteristics as you go across the electroparagram. And I can look and see, hey, this looks like a two-person mixture. This one contributor is providing more DNA material than this other contributor.
As to item number 23, can you say which individual contributed more genetic material to that cutting on the front of the t-shirt Drew filmed it?
I cannot specifically say that, but the likelihood ratio would provide the verbal qualifier that there's very strong support that Mr. Williams was included as the issue, or actually the issue.
So going, and then in terms of, did you also analyze that cutting against Cortland Henry?
I did. Mr. Henry was excluded as a contributor.
So I want to also take a moment here to talk about different types of DNA and serology. Did you do serology on this particular item 23?
I did, yes. I did a presumptive test for the indications of blood, and it was positive.
If there are blood, genetic material, and epithelial genetic material.
Just to mention,
Does that change your analysis in any way?
They haven't mentioned one strain of DNA.
And why not?
That's connected to
If a stain has
Melly.
Potential blood on it, I'm going to
It's
take a
Cortland's
cutting or a sampling based on the size of that blood stain.
sac chaser, and
Because I can't saturate my DNA extract
can't
from all the
remember what the
blood,
other guy's name is.
DNA from the blood stain,
But
in hopes
the three
that
dudes
I
that were in the
obtain
car
enough
are talking about their
there
DNA.
is
Still
any
haven't mentioned Melly yet.
second contributor from any potential epithelial cells. And epithelial cells are basically the skin cells on the outside surfaces of your body. So if I were to rub this bench top here, deposit some of my DNA from my skin cells from my hand, and then there's a blood stain that comes up next to it. If the investigator swabs this, essentially this mixture of my DNA plus the blood stain, the blood is going to, for the most part, cover up or provide a majority of that DNA because the blood is a far richer source of DNA than the skin cells.
Is a person's DNA the same in every cell in their body?
It is.
So going on to now item number 23. What is that described as? I'm sorry, 24. We just finished 23. Item 24. What is that described as?
The cutting blood stain on rear of t-shirts, Drew Phil Medit, CG10.
Did you do a DNA analysis on item number 24?
I did. It was interpreted as originating from a single male contributor.
And you were able to make a reasonable or a likelihood ratio as to which individual contributed to that blood stain?
I did the comparisons to the three individuals. The DNA results are at least 1.59 times 10 to the 25th, or 15.9 septillion times more likely if they originated from Mr. Thomas, Christopher Thomas, than if they originated from one unrelated, unknown individual.
Were you able
Mr. Henry and Mr. Williams were excluded as contributors.
That's my next question. So with regards to item number 25, were you able to conduct a DNA analysis of that item?
I did.
What was that item identified to you as?
Swab, blood stain, G12, Air Jordan.
Bro, get your hand out your mouth,
Sneaker
man.
E.
Got them jurors staring at you like that.
Were you able to come to a conclusion as to the source of that blood stain?
I obtained a DNA profile and interpreted it as originating from a single male contributor. Mr. Williams or all three individuals were compared in comparison to Mr. Anthony Williams. The results are at least 5.3 times 10 to the 25th, or 53 septillion, times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
Wow.
Mr. Henry and Mr. Thomas were excluded as contributors.
So I want to move on to the next report that you did.
You're just joining in there. They're finally
lab,
throwing out some DNA evidence.
When evidence is submitted to the lab, is it submitted in batches?
But
from
none of the
investigating-
DNA evidence actually has anything to do with Melly.
Submitted, we have a submission
So-
policy, so based off of the type of
Let's see where they're
incident
gonna
that's
go with
being
this one.
investigated, there's essentially a number of items that can be submitted. In the cases of homicides, there are typically 10 to 12 items per testing
Shout out to all
round,
the
what we
people
call
on
it.
Twitch that just joined in, man. Hope y'all
to
having a good day.
provide the
Shout out to
most
the people on
appropriate
Facebook.
the most
Riding the
appropriate
whole
evidence
day.
for their
Hope y'all having a good
investigation
day.
first, and
YouTube.
then
Hope
move
y'all
on
having a good day.
after
Kick.
that.
Hope y'all having a good day.
With the cases of maybe a non-suspect burglary case, you may only get 2 evidence items worth.
So far, they
In
put
terms
out
of
some
limits on
evidence,
homicide cases,
but as
is
of
there any
right
limit on
now,
the number of items that
none
can be
against Melly. So
There's no
far.
limit as far as I know. Again, we just, it's worked in series of samples so that 100 or 150 items aren't submitted all at once. Again, to try and have the investigator determine which would be the most appropriate evidence for the investigation.
And in terms of your role in that process, do you know the underlying facts of the investigation as it's progressing?
Sometimes yes, but mostly no. I'm typically just assigned the case. There may be some communications between the unit supervisor and the investigator as to why more evidence is being submitted or reasons why the investigator is requesting more evidence.
In front of you, there's a stack of items that have already been admitted into evidence that may approach
There we go. Some more evidence.
We've talked about a few already here. Do you recognize the green
Man,
sticker
bro,
on this
zoom
item
out
that's
before
already
you
been
pan
admitted
now.
as States 58? Please.
Yes.
And how do you recognize that?
On the back, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and all the other numbers as they were submitted to the laboratory.
And do you then assign the individual numbers that we talked about?
Yes, the numbers are assigned based off our record-keeping system. They're a sequential number, so the first item gets number 1, and then sequentially down the line.
Okay. Moving on to what's been placed into evidence as States 53. Again, do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and my item numbers marked on it.
What's been previously admitted into evidence as States 33. Do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has all my markings on it.
Okay. As to what has been admitted as States 46.
Yes, again, the items are marked and my notations are on the evidence.
Okay.
Oh, you can
And
just
as
go for
to
every single
item
last one of
States
them.
32. Did you ever get this one?
I don't think so.
So the answer is no.
No, I do not, because my markings are not on here.
Okay. As to what's been admitted as State 26. Have you reviewed that item?
Yes, I have.
Is that
I've
okay?
marked it and with my laboratory item numbers and my initials.
So I'm approaching with what's been previously marked as State GG for identification purposes only. Okay, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as States GG for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item? Please. It is open.
Yes, it has my markings on it, case number, item numbers, initials.
Did you analyze the items inside of that package?
Yes, I did.
Hold on just a moment.
A lot of packages.
So showing defense counsel, it's been marked as states triple T. Correct.
But just keep in mind, guys, although she's bringing up all this evidence to the front, he's only
Showing
testified
marked
that
as states
DNA.
triple T for identification purposes only.
He's
You recognize
only-
that item?
He's only been able to verify what we already know
Information marked on the outside.
with his DNA.
And
You
did
know,
you
what
collect that
clothes
item?
belong to who, what flip-flops belong to who,
Is that an
who
item
was
that you
sitting in
analyzed?
what seat.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll come back to that. Thank you so much.
Things like that.
So all of the items that we're looking at here, Mr. Rose, are packaged in paper bags.
4 manila envelopes, yes.
Why is that?
The investigators use these types of evidence packaging in case the evidence is wet. It helps to allow air to get through the package to dry it. One of the things that will cause issues, degradation, is essentially having a biological stain remain wet, and mold, mildew, and bacteria will grow on it and potentially destroy any DNA present.
Is it important to keep DNA in a dry environment for preserving it?
Yes.
Is there limits on the temperature range in which the DNA is kept at the evidence vault?
There's no limits.
Is she beginning at the fact that Melly never provided his clothing?
60 degrees, maybe
And
65.
it's been too long to
We
get
do
any
have
evidence
freezers
from it?
that
I
we
don't
have
know. I don't know where
full
she's going with
cases.
this.
So
Where are you
as long
going?
as the evidence is kept cool and dry, and the frozen is cool and dry, the DNA will persist.
Did Melly
for
go
the
swimming after? I
In
don't
terms
know.
of if the DNA is heated, would that cause degradation to it?
Yes, heat, moisture, and sunlight are three of the main factors that will cause degradation and essentially
So
destruction
pretty much
of
if
the
a
DNA.
package was transferred from one
So
place to another
Why don't
and
they
it
keep
was
it in
in...
plastic bags?
The plastic won't allow any air to get through to the evidence, and it will basically cause condensation if it's moist. If the evidence is moist or wet, which will then lead to the mold, mildew, and bacteria growing.
So either way, any
Can one person's DNA
negligence of
change
DNA
to
could
become
screw
someone
up
else's?
everything.
No.
How does it not, does air bring other DNA into those bags and samples?
No.
So going back now on to item number 26 that you processed. What was that identified as to you?
Swab from Yellow Jacket.
And there's another number that you list in your notes and reports of an 81. Where is that number coming from?
The first number, 26, is the item number that is generated in the laboratory when I am doing inventory in my inventory system. The 81 is the agency number as it's submitted on the property receipt.
So going on to item number 26, did you analyze the swab of the yellow jacket as it's described?
I did, yes.
And what were your conclusions on that particular item?
The results were interpreted as a mixture originating from 4 contributors.
So were you able to make determinations as to the standards that you had?
I did, yes.
Okay, we could discuss first with regards to Anthony Williams. What conclusion did you reach and what statistical basis for that?
He was included as a contributor to the mixture and the likelihood calculation. The results are at least 2.05 times 10 to the 8th, or 205 million. Times more likely if these DNA results originated from Anthony Williams and 3 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 4 unrelated unknown individuals.
In terms of a 4-person mixture, do you expect the statistics to be a little bit lower, just based on that?
It depends on, again, when I was speaking of contribution, if a person is more represented in a sample the statistics or likelihood calculation can be rather large. It just depends on how much contribution is in that mixture.
Were you able to exclude anybody from the swab of the yellow jacket, item 26?
Christopher Thomas and Cortland Henry were excluded.
In terms of item number 27, how was that? I'm sorry. Yes, item number 27. How was that number identified?
Probably trying to tie that to Millie.
Swab from Gatorade bottle.
Were you able to analyze that and develop DNA profiles?
I obtained a single source profile indicating male origin.
Were you able to determine the single source origin of that profile?
Christopher Thomas was included. The likelihood calculation is as follows. The DNA results are at least 1.65 times 10 to the 25th, or 16.5 septillion, times more likely if they originated from Mr. Thomas than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
Okay. Going on to item number 28. Did you do the same?
I did.
And what was that listed as?
Swab from Gatorade bottle.
And that swab, who were you able to determine, or what DNA conclusions were you able to make?
The DNA results were interpreted as originated from a single male contributor. Mr. Anthony Williams was included. The likelihood calculation, the DNA results are at least 4.38 times 10 to the 25th, or 43.8 septillion times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
At this point in everything that we have talked about, were you provided a standard for the defendant, Jamel Devins?
No.
So going on to item number 29, were you able to develop a DNA profile on that particular item?
I analyzed the results and deemed it to be uninterpretable due to limited data.
And what was item number 29?
It's listed as swab from bloodstain on rear passenger seat, PM number 1.
And you couldn't say where that was collected from?
I can.
Going on to your next report, the MW2 filter. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what is an MW2 filter?
An MW2 filter is a filter paper where the investigator will essentially soak the surface of whatever they're looking for, maybe a shirt or a shoe or even a door, in a liquid, and they come back and they vacuum it up. And all of that vacuumed up liquid will then go and be deposited on the filter paper. That filter paper is then taken out of the apparatus, dried, and then I will take a portion of that filter paper and try and develop a DNA profile.
Get your hand out your mouth.
The surface that they process.
Excuse me, I didn't hear the item number. What's that?
It's item number 31 of his report.
Thank you.
So on the MVAC filter, item 31, that you were asked to process in this case, what was your information relayed as to where that MVAC source was?
It's identified as MVAC filter 9 from spent casings found on ground at US 27 and Southwest 208th Avenue.
So we talked a little bit about things that are conducive to DNA. Does sunlight have an effect on it, you said, I believe, right?
Yes, it can.
What does sunlight do to DNA if exposed?
Again, with the heat, light, and moisture, it allows bacteria to grow and to essentially degrade the DNA.
Okay. And when you did an analysis of item number 31, the MVAC filter, what conclusions were you able to draw?
I did an extraction on the piece of evidence, and after quantitation, I determined that there was insufficient amount of extracted DNA to go forward. So I did not attempt to develop a DNA profile, and I stopped processing at that point.
And if you remind ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what does it mean if you stop it at that second step?
The extraction, meaning I would not obtain a DNA profile that could be used for any sort of comparisons. There just isn't enough genetic material in the extract.
What is the information, what are you relying on, and what training and experience to make that conclusion?
It's the quantitation results, the type of samples.
But this boy don't get his finger out of his damn mouth.
So I'm not surprised that MVACs from casings yield very little DNA.
Moving on to your next
They
report,
got the
item
cams on you, my
32.
Finger out your mouth.
Was that item provided to you for DNA analysis?
It was, yes.
And that is in evidence, I believe, if I may. As states 46.
Yes.
So if I may, published for the jury.
You may.
So I'm publishing now states 46. What was states 46
Finally,
reported to you today?
some kind of something.
These are oral swabs or standards from juvenile demons.
And with regards to item number 32 and 33 in your report, are they the same?
Item number 32 is listed as the right cheek, and 33 is listed as the left cheek.
Similar to we previously talked about, did you just pick one to test?
Correct, I did, just the first one.
Is there any rhyme or reason as to picking the right versus the left?
Nope.
Going on, and so once you got this standard, did you go back and look at the other evidence you previously analyzed?
Yes, so comparisons were made to all the previously analyzed
Okay, so here we go. Some
So going to item number 22.
specifically Melly's DNA right here,
Swab
bruh.
from the Gucci sandals. Were you able
Let's
to
see what
compare
they got.
the profile from Mr. Demons as opposed to the profile developed from those sandals?
I did, and he was excluded.
The blood stain on
No
the
Gucci
front
sandals.
of the t-shirt, item number 23. Were you able to compare Mr. Demons' profile to that?
I did a comparison, and he was again excluded.
What about item number 24?
No t-shirt.
The cutting on the blood stain of the rear of the t-shirt.
After comparisons were done, he was excluded.
No blood from the
Okay,
from the
then
t-shirt.
on item number 25. The swab of the blood stain from the Air Jordans.
Again, an exclusion.
Going
No
on
Jordan.
to item number 26, the swab from the yellow jacket.
An exclusion as well.
And in terms of the item number 27 and 28, the swabs of the Gatorade bottles. What were the results on that?
Those were both exclusions.
So going forward to what's been shown to you but not yet admitted into evidence for identification purposes is states triple T. What was that item told to you to be?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. On your item 34, what's been shown to you for identification purposes only as states triple T. What was that item described to you to be?
It's listed as a cutting of headliner.
And how did you analyze that particular piece of evidence?
You said headphone?
That evidence, I had to do a visual examination on it and actually take a cutting of a potential blood stain.
And can you explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's the difference between using it from a swab versus a cutting of an item?
This was a piece of evidence, a headliner. It was the size, maybe a foot squared. There were some small red brown stains on there. So there's oftentimes where the evidence itself is better to be submitted as opposed to moistening a cotton tip swab and then swabbing it, just in case the small blood stain becomes too diffuse on the cotton tip swab. And why that's important is...
So you guys cut it out, okay?
I do my best to preserve evidence for future testing. So if an item of evidence is submitted, I typically process only half of the evidence. If there's only one swab submitted, I'll process half of the swab, leaving half for retesting either in current technologies by another laboratory or save it for future testing when technology has advanced even further. So,
Webstaurant Store, for whatever your restaurant needs. Most products ship free with Webstaurant Plus.
beneficial to actually examine the evidence and take a cutting, as I did in this particular case.
Okay, and in terms of were you able to do an analysis and develop a profile on that particular item?
I did. I obtained a DNA profile originating from a single male contributor.
And were you able to identify the source of that single male contributor?
Mr. Anthony Williams was included as a contributor.
And what support can you assign to him being the contributor?
The likelihood ratio calculation, the results are 5.12 times 10 to the 25th, or 51.2 septillion times more likely if it originated from Mr. Williams than if it originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
Did you also do serology on that specific item?
I did. I did presumptive testing for blood, and it was positive.
When you're doing DNA testing on this, will you know without doing serology if something is epithelial or blood?
I would have.
In this case, the serology indicated blood. And which test did you use to determine that?
I used a phenolphthalein test.
And were any individuals excluded from that sample?
Mr. Henry, Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Devins were excluded as contributors.
So moving on to item number 40. We're getting towards the end. With regards to item number 40, was that item submitted and analysis done?
Yes.
Okay. What was item number 40? What steps of the DNA process did you take it through as well?
Item number 40 was extracted for DNA, but after quantitation, there wasn't a sufficient amount of DNA to move forward, so I did not attempt to do any DNA profiling.
And what was item number 40 described as?
A contact swab of non-blood area of rear of driver's seat.
And is this the same discussion we had with regards to the last item? With not enough DNA, so then you stop it at that first step?
Correct, after extraction. Sure, after quantitation.
Why don't you at least try and take it through and go through all the steps?
Oftentimes, the quantitation results in a 0, meaning none was detected. Sometimes it results in a null value, meaning not even less than 0 was obtained. So at that point, I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to obtain a DNA profile.
Do you do a control swab or sample as you're going through the DNA process each time?
The DNA processing has several controls during extraction. I have a reagent blank, and this is just a sample of just the reagents by themselves. The extraction reagents that I use will be processed with the samples to ensure that the reagents are free of contaminants. When I do a amplification for PCR, there will be a positive control and a negative control. The negative control is again just a tube of reagents. There shouldn't be any DNA present at the end. And the positive control is a known DNA standard. And so after I do my amplification, the negative control needs to be blank, and the positive control needs to generate, or I need to generate the DNA profile from that positive control.
So let's go back. You mentioned reagents. I don't think we've defined that for the jury here today. What is a reagent?
Reagents are the chemicals that I use for my DNA processing.
Are they standard and part of the kit that you were talking about earlier?
There are different components in the amplification kit, quantitation kit. We have different reagents used for extraction. So at every step there are a set of reagents that we use.
And those are all related to the controls as well?
Correct.
So going back, so once we talked about that, let's talk about item number 41. What was item 41 described to you as?
It's listed as blood swab of smear from rear of driver's seat.
Were you able to come to any sort of conclusion as to item 41?
I obtained some results, but I reported that they were uninterpretable due to limited data.
What does that mean?
Meaning I obtained the electrocardiogram stage, I've analyzed the ending result of that PCR amplification and deemed that there wasn't sufficient amount of DNA to make any comparisons.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to item number 66. Did you analyze that particular
Tell
item?
you, bro. It's crazy.
And in terms of what was item number 66?
He look like he going crazy.
Item number 66 was initially...
He looked like he got
reported
murdered on
as
his mind right
contact
now.
swab of rear of driver's side door handle interior.
Were you able to determine what the packaging of item number 66 said?
Yes, the contact swab of rear of driver's side door handle interior.
I'm sorry, number 66 is which?
Front of driver's side door handle.
So you can't testify as to which it came from.
I'm not sure of the question.
You didn't collect this item of evidence.
No, I didn't.
So after reviewing the item analysis, did you amend your report to read contact swab of front driver's side door handle interior?
That's correct.
So going on to item number 42, which is been labeled as item 66 by the Mirror Markers Department. What results did you have?
They still don't have anything. I don't know what's going on.
Profile, but ruled it or determined it to be uninterpretable due to limited data.
Does uninterpretable mean no DNA?
In this case, no, there was
Not enough DNA, girl.
There
That's
was
what that
DNA,
means.
but
Not enough DNA for him to make a match.
to make any sort of determination, number of contributors or even comparisons.
Are you still looking back at those same standards that we've talked about previously?
The interpretation of the question samples is done prior to looking at the interpretation of
This
the
boy Melly don't keep his
Why is
damn
that?
finger out
It's
his
to
mouth,
avoid,
bro.
any
Get your
sort of
finger
bias.
out your mouth, bro.
I want to make my interpretation calls of those unknowns absent of knowing what the known standards are.
Does the computer do any of this analysis or say, hey, it's person A or person B for you?
No, it does not.
So moving on to item number 43. Is that the last item you tested in this case?
Yes.
So with regards to what was item number 43 listed as?
Swab, rear driver's side door, handle interior.
Were you able to do DNA testing on that particular item?
I did. Yes.
Did you develop a profile?
I did.
And can you explain what DNA profile you developed?
In this particular case, I reported out both a 2-person mixture and a 3-person mixture.
And so explain why you would report out 2 different hypotheses.
When I did the initial interpretation of the question sample of this item 43, there was the appearance of a 2-person mixture. After doing a comparison to known standards and doing the likelihood calculation, the result was essentially unintuitive. There was a lot of contribution being attributed to an individual, but then resulted in an exclusionary likelihood ratio.
So can you explain what that means in a little bit simpler math terms, if possible?
Yeah, essentially the likelihood ratio resulted in exclusion. So after talking with my technical leader, I determined that we both came to the consensus that it would be best to report out or then interpret it as a 3-person mixture and then report out both results.
So with regards to when you're saying it's an exclusion, is there a certain number of loci that it has to not match for you to report it as an exclusion?
When it comes to likelihood ratios, as I have mentioned before, it's doing it's comparing 2 hypotheses. Essentially that a person is included versus a person, an unrelated unknown individual is included. And it does this at every specific location. So going through all of those locations, there's the potential to have 16, 17, 18 locus-specific likelihoods, likelihood ratios. And at the end of it, those are all multiplied together to get the final result. So if one specific location results in a 0 likelihood ratio, but everything else is inclusionary, it's an indication that there's an issue with how the software was set up. And so as an analyst, I would go back and see what the issue was and then rerun this deconvolution and redo the calculations. In this particular case, after doing a visual comparison of the standards to the mixture and then looking at the resulting likelihood ratios, again, I spoke with the technical leader and we determined that there will be best to report out both.
So I'm going to go starting with the alternative proposition on that. Were you able to exclude anyone in the alternative proposition that you put forth?
Mr. Cortland Henry was excluded.
With regards to the initial proposition,
Cortland Henry, Anthony Williams, and Jamel Dimmons were excluded.
who was included on the initial proposition?
Christopher Thomas was included.
When you were looking at it as 2 contributors, how did you exclude the defendant in this case, Mr. Dimmons?
How did I exclude him?
Yes.
So again, after doing the visual comparison and then running it through to generate the likelihood ratio, it resulted in an exclusionary likelihood ratio.
When you looked at it again as a 3-person mixture, were you able to make a determination as to whether or not Christopher Thomas was included as a source of that mixture?
Yeah, he was included as a 3-person as well.
And what were the statistics on the 3-person mixture for Christopher Thomas?
I'm muted.
The
There we go,
results
guys.
are
My
at
bad.
least 8.15 times 10 to the 24th.
Thank you, sir.
Or 8.15
Appreciate you.
times more likely if they originated from Christopher Thomas, and 2
So pretty
unrelated
much what I've been saying
than if they originated
is
from
that
3
Melly
unrelated individuals.
himself
In terms
hasn't
of
been tied
as
to any
Cortland
evidence in the
Henry,
car
were you able
as
to
far as
do
like
statistical calculations
you know,
as to
like
whether or not he was
fingerprints
excluded
or
on a 3-person mixture?
DNA, blood, mouth swabs from the Gatorade bottles that were in the car, nothing.
Yes, the results are at most 46, and this is an inverse LR calculation because the number was less than 1. So the DNA results are at most 46 times more likely if it originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals than if it originated from Cortland Henry and 2 unrelated unknown individuals.
It's
So is your conclusion that Mr.
Brian.
Henry is excluded from
As
that?
far as how it's looking for
sample?
Melly, it's pretty much been the same
Going
all
on
day. I've
to
just been trying to
Anthony
figure out
Williams.
what they
Are
got
you able
against
to
them.
make a
Nothing as of right
conclusion
now,
as to
bro.
Whether or not he was included or excluded.
So it's
I
looking.
did.
I mean,
He was included. The LR calculation, the DNA results are at least 41.2 times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams and 2 unrelated unknown individuals than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
okay, so
And in
that's
terms
still
of the
nothing.
verbal qualifier that you would give for Mr. Williams.
So Melly
to be
looking,
included in that sample,
Melly looking decent as of
what
right now.
verbal qualifier would you give?
Limited support for inclusion.
Is that the lowest for inclusion?
Yes.
Okay. I believe I forgot to ask you with Christopher Thomas, what verbal qualifier would you give if he is included on that?
It is the highest at very strong support.
And at last but not least, were you able to analyze the profile
Yeah, bro.
of the defendant,
I've been
Jamel
literally
Dimmons,
watching
in this case?
and streaming
I did.
and
what was your conclusion in the
running every
three-person
kind of like
mixture
scenario I could possibly
as to
think of. This lady
the
could come up
results of
with,
Mr.
and
Dimmons being included or excluded?
so
He was
far I still
included.
have nothing.
The likelihood calculation,
And all the DNA that they're providing today for this case right now, it all comes from Cortland Henry and the other 2 guys that were
if they originated from
that were
Janelle
killed.
Lemons
So it's like,
and 2 unrelated unknown individuals, than if they originated from 3 unrelated unknown individuals.
And what verbal qualifier did you give to that particular item of
Very-
Mr. Dimmons being included?
There is very strong support for the inclusion.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
finally. My goodness.
Sure. We'll take a short recess. Do not discuss the case. Don't form any
Take a
opinion about
short
it. Please don't
recess,
allow
guys. I'm
anyone
gonna
to
go take a quick break as well, man. I've been sitting here for King LeBron TV has been reporting for 3 hours and 20 minutes, man. Y'all go ahead and subscribe, bro. We dedicated over here, my boys. Like I said, subscribe because the next case is gonna be the Cortland Henry case, and we definitely gonna be on it. We definitely gonna be on that one too. And we got some Young Thug coming up too, so
I would just call
y'all
them.
make sure
Give
y'all
us a
subscribe.
call.
But I'm gonna go ahead and take a quick
We
break.
out to
Everything's
it.
gonna still be running smoothly for you guys. See y'all in a few minutes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, can you arrange that? Thank you. We're on recess.
Hey, welcome back to Law and Crime. So how does this happen? How do these guys that are working so closely together in the rap industry in South Florida, how does this unfold one night in October of 2018? They're all in a car. Maybe the defendant, Jamel Demons, is in that car. Maybe he's not. But somehow, in the end of the night, 2 of his buddies, Anthony Williams, a.k.a. Sack Chaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., a.k.a. Juvie, they're dead. They're literally taken to the hospital a little after 4 in the morning. They left the studio about 2:17. How did all this unfold and what happened? The prosecution says that Demons did it, period. We haven't heard a great story about motive. We know you don't need one. Maybe there was some money issue, licensing. We've heard a little testimony on that maybe Demons wanted all of that money for himself, so he kind of cut out some of the middlemen. And that's about all we know at this point. So we are in the middle of the prosecution's case, and we are hearing DNA testimony that we expect is going to more clearly link these parties and where they were that night. Remember, there's a question as to who was in the car. Were the shots fired from within the car, or were they, as Demons suggests, the victim of a drive-by that night? So all these questions still up in the air, and the prosecution doing their best to get them answered. Right now, Kurt Rhodes on the stands. He's the DNA dude, and he's trying to help this jury understand what happened that night when these 2 men died. Let's go back into the courtroom.
What is that described as? I'm sorry, 24. We just finished 23. Item 24. What is that described as?
The cutting bloodstain on rear of t-shirts, Drew Phil Bennett, CG10.
Did you do a DNA analysis on item number 24?
I did. It was interpreted as originating from a single male contributor.
And you were able to make a reasonable or a likelihood ratio as to which individual contributed to that bloodstain?
I did the comparisons to the 3 individuals. The DNA results are at least 1.59 times 10 to the 25th, or 15.9 septillion times more likely if they originated from Mr. Thomas, Christopher Thomas, than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual.
Were you able
Mr. Henry and Mr. Williams were excluded as contributors.
My next question. So with regards to item number 25, were you able to conduct a DNA analysis of that item?
I did.
What was that item identified to you as?
Swab, bloodstain, G12, Air Jordan, sneaker E.
Were you able to come to a conclusion as to the source of that bloodstain?
I obtained a DNA profile and interpreted as originating from a single male contributor. Mr. Williams, where all three individuals were compared in comparison to Mr. Anthony Williams. The results are at least 5.3 times 10 to the 25th, or 53 septillion, times more likely if they originated from Anthony Williams than if they originated from one unrelated unknown individual. Mr. Henry and Mr. Thomas were excluded as contributors.
So I want to move on to the next report that you did. In terms of the crime lab and how it works, when evidence is submitted to the lab, is it submitted in batches from the investigative agencies?
When evidence is submitted, we have a submission policy. So based off of the type of incident that's being investigated, there's essentially a number of items that can be submitted. In the cases of homicides, there are typically 10 to 12 items per testing round, is what we call it. We want the investigators to provide the most probative value, the most probative evidence for their investigation first, and then move on after that. With the cases of maybe a non-suspect burglary case, you may only get 2 evidence items worth.
In terms of limits on homicide cases, is there any limit to the number of items that can be worked?
There's no limit as far as I know. Again, it's worked in a series of samples so that 100 or 150 items aren't submitted all at once. Again, to try and have the investigator determine which would be the most probative evidence for the investigation.
And in terms of your role in that process, do you know the underlying facts of the investigation as it's progressing?
Sometimes yes, but mostly no. I'm typically just assigned the case. There may be some communications between the unit supervisor and the investigator as to why more evidence is being submitted or reasons why the investigator is requesting more evidence.
In front of you, there's a stack of items that have already been admitted into evidence that may approach on. We've talked about a few already here. Do you recognize the green sticker on this item that's already been admitted as State 58? Please.
Yes.
And how do you recognize that?
On the back, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and all the item numbers as they were submitted to the laboratory.
And do you then assign the individual numbers that we talked about?
Yes, the numbers are assigned based off our record-keeping system. They're a sequential number, so the first item gets number 1, and then sequentially down the line.
Okay. Moving on to what's been placed into evidence as State 53. Again, do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has my laboratory number, my initials, and my item numbers marked on it.
What's been previously admitted into evidence as State 33. Do you recognize that item?
I do. Again, it has all my markings on it.
Okay. As to what has been admitted as State 46.
Yes, again, the items are marked and my notations on the evidence.
Okay. And as to item State 32, did you ever get this one?
I don't think so.
So the answer is no.
No, I do not, because my markings are not on here.
Okay. As to what's been admitted as State 26, have you reviewed that item?
Yes, I have. I've marked it and with my laboratory item numbers and my initials.
So I'm approaching with what's been previously marked as State GG for identification purposes only. Okay, I'm showing you it's been previously marked as states GG for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item? Please. It is open.
Yes, it has my markings on it, case number, item numbers, initials.
Did you analyze the items inside of that package?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Hold on just a moment. So showing defense counsel, it's been marked as states triple T. Sorry. Showing you what's been marked as states triple T for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that item?
I do. It again has my information marked on the outside.
And did you collect that item?
No, I did not collect it.
Is that an item that you analyzed?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll come back to that. Thank you so much. So all of the items that we're looking at here, Mr. Rose, are packaged in paper bags.
Or manila envelopes. Yes.
Why is that?
The investigators use these types of evidence packaging in case the evidence is wet. It helps to allow air to get through the package to dry it. One of the things that will cause issues, degradation, is essentially having a biological stain remain wet, and mold, mildew, and bacteria will grow on it and potentially destroy any DNA that's present.
Is it important to keep DNA in a dry environment for preserving it?
Yes.
Is there limits on the temperature range in which the DNA is kept at the evidence vault?
There's no limits. The evidence vaults in laboratories are around 60 degrees, maybe 65. We do have freezers that we have old cases. So as long as the evidence is kept cool and dry, and being frozen is cool and dry, the DNA will persist for decades.
In terms of if the DNA is heated, would that cause degradation to it?
Yes. Heat, moisture, and sunlight are three of the main factors that will cause degradation and essentially destruction of the DNA present.
So why don't they just keep it in plastic bags?
The plastic won't allow any air to get through to the evidence, and it will basically cause condensation if it's moist. If the evidence is moist or wet, which will then lead to the mold, mildew, and bacteria growing.
Can one person's DNA change to become someone else's?
No.
How does it not? Does air bring other DNA into those bags and samples?
No.
So going back now on to item number 26 that you processed. What was that identified as to you?
Swab from Yellow Jacket.
And there's another number that you list in your notes and reports of an 81. Where is that number coming from?
The first number, 26, is the item number that is generated in the laboratory when I am doing inventory in my inventory system. The 81 is the agency number as it's submitted on the property receipt.
Okay. So going on to item number 26, did you analyze the swab of the Yellow Jacket as it's described?
I did, yes.
And what were your conclusions on that particular item?
The results were interpreted as a mixture originating from 4 contributors.
So were you able to make determinations as to
Jury entry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. Let the record once again reflect the presence of defendants, evidence, his counsel, and assistant state attorneys. Ladies and gentlemen, the jury, witness remains on the stand. Counsel, this is your opportunity for cross-examination. If you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to say good evening to you.
Yes, good
I
evening.
feel like it's nighttime today. By any chance, do you know George Bellow?
He is the unit supervisor for the firearms section.
Yeah. He gave us an education on firearms, and you've now given us an education on DNA. So he said he would give us some type of certificate. So I expect you also to get some type of certificate on DNA. But in any event, when did you perform your first DNA testing? The date, please.
May I refer to my notes?
Absolutely. Feel free at any time.
My initial examination of the first evidence was on January 23 of 2019.
2019.
Correct.
And that's when you analyzed or examined various items that came out of a grade G. That was water bottle, some sneakers, I think, a yellow jacket, a Gatorade bottle, item 27, I think you identified.
For this particular date, it was items 16 through 25.
16 through 25, okay. On 123 of 19, you examined a water bottle, a spent casing, Gucci sandals, and a blood stain on front of a t-shirt and a blood stain on the rear of the t-shirt. And also a blood stain on an Air Jordan sneaker, correct?
That's correct.
That turned out not to come back to this young man right over here, correct? Mr. Demons. I'm going to call him Jamel. It's easier. Okay. Is that correct?
At this time or later? 'Cause
Later.
Later. May I refer to my report?
Absolutely. And give us a date that you did that,
Absolutely.
please.
So on January 25th of 2022 is when the comparisons were made to Mr. Devins, and he was excluded from all those items.
That was January of what?
The report was issued on January 25th of 2022.
I'm sorry.
I did my analysis on January 24th, the day before.
Okay. That was approximately 3 years after he was arrested. Did you know that?
I did not.
Then you analyzed, did you not, item 26, a yellow jacket, a Gatorade bottle, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And what date did you examine those items?
That was on August 24th of 2021.
August 24th, you said?
Correct.
Of 21. That was 2 years approximately after he was arrested. Did you know that?
I did not.
And those came from inside the Jeep. Did you know that?
I did not.
And those did not match Jamel, correct?
That's correct. He was excluded.
Then you received some additional items. correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What was the date that you received the additional items?
They were received on multiple days.
Okay, give us the first date you received additional items, please.
I began processing the impact filter on January 5th of 2022.
That was approximately 3 years after his arrest.
The cutting of the headliner, which is item 34,
When did you receive that?
was I began processing on January 28th of 2022.
Okay. Also about 3 years after his arrest.
Objection, counsel's testifying.
I thought it was a question. Restate it. Restate your question.
Did you know it was approximately 3 years after he was arrested?
I did not. Additional items were submitted. These were items 40, 41, and 42. Those were processed on April 25th of 2023.
April 25th of 23?
That's correct.
Did you know that was after we started this
Objection,
trial?
Your Honor, improper.
Excuse me. Watch from sidewalk.
Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, don't think I ain't been watching. I've been watching. I have been watching, and what I've heard so far is that this gentleman is stating that none of the DNA from the car matches Melly, and then that
What's
3 to
the
2 years
that was after this trial started?
the murders is when this man got this stuff, and he didn't even know that.
April 25th of 23.
He didn't even know how old the DNA was.
2 months ago?
The headliner was, that was prior.
Oh, I'm sorry. The item that you received on April.
Wow.
23 was what?
Those were the contact swab, non-blood area of rear driver's seat, the blood swab of smear from rear of driver's seat, and the contact swab of front driver side door handle interior.
Shout out to Ryan,
And
235
you did not
following.
know that was
My
after
boy.
this trial started, correct?
I did not know.
And none of that came back to the DNA of this young man, Jamel, correct?
Correct. It was deemed uninterpretable, as well as one of the items I did not attempt to generate a DNA profile because there was insufficient amount of DNA.
Do you know what the delay was in sending that evidence to you?
Objection, outside the scope. Speculation.
Yeah, what was the delay? What was the delay, my boy?
And did you receive any other items in 2023?
Yes, one last item, item 43.
And that was the door handle of the rear door? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And did I hear you correctly that you first ran a test and it did not come back matching or belonging to or contributor to Jamel?
That's correct.
And did I also hear you correctly then you discussed something about your software with your supervisor?
With the technical leader, yes.
And then ran another test? and had a 3-person contributor,
That's correct.
and all of a sudden it matched or it was labeled as Jamel may have been a contributor.
That's correct.
What date was that, sir?
That was on June 1st, 2023.
Approximately 3 weeks ago?
That's correct.
Who requested that,
Objection, Your
if you
Honor.
know?
What's the objection?
Speculation outside the scope.
Well, as far as outside the scope, so if he knows, he can answer.
How is that outside the
Who
scope? I bet you
submitted
couldn't
that
hear me.
item to you 3 weeks ago?
It would have been Miramar, the investigators.
Miramar Police Department?
So
Yes, I can
for
look
a
at
whole,
my,
for a whole
Feel free.
fucking 4 years, they were sitting on evidence all the way up until 3 weeks before the trial. That may tie him to the vehicle. May tie him.
It was submitted by a Miramar investigator. Mark Moretti.
Moretti.
Who was listed on the submission form.
And that was the only item that supposedly matched Jamel's DNA, correct?
I believe so. I can look back just to confirm it.
Please do.
But I do believe that is an accurate assessment.
I want to know what the item was. The flip-flops? Or something actually in the car?
Yes, there was an item with the inclusionary likelihood issue.
Could you tell these folks when that DNA was placed on, supposedly, on the door handle?
No.
It could have been placed a week.
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
How long can DNA stay on an item?
The DNA can persist on items. Again, as I mentioned, heat, light, moisture can cause it to degrade or become unusable. But if DNA is deposited on the surface, it can last weeks, months, years, if kept in a nice, cool, dry environment.
Did you know this Jeep was stored in police custody in a safe, dry area?
I do not.
May I have one other question?
I was just about to ask that. 'Cause you can't say that. You can't say that because that vehicle was stored for how long? Close to 4 years now?
Thank you very much.
Is there any redirection?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Rhodes, is it unusual to receive multiple submissions over the life of a case?
No, it's not unusual.
Does the date in which you work a particular item have any effect on the results you report on?
No, it is not.
As to the likelihood ratio on item number 43, who was included in that particular item?
For both propositions, Mr. Thomas was included for both the 2-person and 3-person contributor propositions. Under the 2-person proposition, Mr. Henry, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Dimmons were excluded. Under the 3-person proposition, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Dimmons were included.
And with regards to the time of collection of that swab, would that be indicated on the box that it is found in?
Sometimes there are indications on the collection. I can look at the marker receipt. It may, I'm not sure if it's a newer one or an older one, but I can look at the marker receipt if you'd like.
Okay, and that would be item number 67, what's been put into evidence as states 33. Latex or not?
Yeah, latex.
So, just to give you a heads up, originally they
And so item 33
found
in evidence, is that item number 67
Melly's
and you're
DNA.
labeling here?
Yes, that's right.
And
What
3
was
weeks
the
ago they
date time
redid
correction according
the
to that
test,
specific item?
So it's dated at
and then they
10/26
placed them in the
of 2018.
vehicle
And the
again,
time?
some way,
1736.
shape, form, through some kind of DNA. So, we're gonna see. We are going to see it as soon as this ad decides to go away. There you go.
If DNA is stored in an optical environment, will it persist forever?
I'm not sure about forever, but it will persist for decades.
And in terms of it, if it is collected on a cotton swab that is dry and sterile, is that a ideal place to perpetuate DNA storage?
Yes.
Nothing further.
I have one or two questions based on that, if the court will allow me.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
You indicated it's not unusual to get multiple submissions of evidence.
Yes, sir.
Do you know why it took 5 years to submit that exhibit to you to analyze?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
He knows he can answer, do you know?
I do not.
Thank you.
Counsel, is there anything else in this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Is he excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Step Counsel, you're excused. Ladies and gentlemen, my understanding is that's all the witnesses we have for today, and so we'll see everybody back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Remember the admonition, do not discuss the case, don't form any opinion about the case, don't allow anyone to discuss the case in the presence of certainly no research, just leave your notepads on your chairs. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Melly. There goes Melly. Looks pretty confident. Looks pretty confident after a long day.
Thank you, sir. You're excused. Anything to discuss, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to do a sidebar. My computer screwed up.
Sidebar?
Oh, we're not over yet.
Jury guys.
Are you? Because of the cameras, I think it would be prudent.
That's fine. Oh, sidebar.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the jury's gone. Pretty much court is over for the day. Anything they're sidebar talking about is probably something that's going to be presented tomorrow. It's clear as day that this isn't going to be done anytime soon. I thought yesterday we would get some kind of mistrial attempt by the defense, but clearly they know that the prosecutors have some evidence we don't know about, and they're building their case as well. So this could be dragged on for a little bit, depending on the DNA. As far as for a win today, if you really look at it, the prosecution didn't have a win because they did submit a bunch of evidence. It's just nothing that ties to Melly. And it's all, oh, okay, well, it could have been Melly, it could have been him, it could have been them, it could have been all three of them. It's a mixture of all three. So, bunch of confusing shit for the jury to try to decipher. I mean, you guys are watching. We couldn't decipher it here. So, I guess they got their job too. So, anyways, tomorrow we will be back with another live stream, my friends. We are committed to seeing the end of this one for sure. And like I said, subscribe because we are going to jump onto the Cortland Henry case right after this. And then the Young Thug case as well is going on. We also going to be streaming that. So jump on, subscribe. It's your boy, King LeBron TV. I appreciate the hundreds of views we got today. It was a dope day. Sorry it was boring on the court side of things, but hopefully tomorrow we get a little bit more excitement, a little bit more boom, you know, and we can stay awake a little longer tomorrow. But like I said, I thank y'all, man. Y'all have a wonderful day. God bless. Have a good night.